going to start looking for the first time at the Modern Horizons spoiler. I haven't, like, it's all over Reddit and Twitter and everyone talks about these cards. I didn't really care because I was like, Modern, I won't be playing that for months. I was super narrow focused on Standard. But now I have a Pro Tour to win, so I need to worry about Modern and Modern Horizons. I'm going to be doing the same kind of stuff because, like, it's every card matters to me in Modern Horizons because I'll be playing Limited. I'll be playing Draft, quite a lot of Draft, in fact. And so I'll be doing the same sort of thing that I did with War of the Spark, analyzing the commons, uncommons, rares, all that sort of stuff, while at the same time looking at cards that are impactful in Modern. It's going to be a lot of mental energy and homework, as it were. Let's start right at the bat. 3 mana, enchantment, answered prayers. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, you gain 1 life. If it isn't a creature, it becomes an angel with flying until the end of a turn. I don't think this is a very good card. It's not a 3/3 on your opponent's turn, unless you can flash in a creature on your opponent's turn. So it's purely aggressive, doesn't block. It's like if you're in an aggressive deck that has a lot of creatures, then it's really good at helping you race, I guess. It's reasonable at helping you race because it is like a 3 mana 3/3 flyer, which is pretty strong. And you gain a life for deploying additional creatures, so it makes the swings back a little bit less impactful, which is good because you can never really use as answered players to block. I think it's not very good in most circumstances and is like okay in the exact circumstance where you're an aggressive white deck that has a lot of creatures in your deck. Astral Drift, 2 and a white for a rare. Whenever you cycle this enchantment or another card, you may exile target creature. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. With cycling. All these. I never played with the set with cycling. I even skipped over Amonkhet or whichever set that recently had cycling as one of the mechanics. So all these Astral Slide in cards I'm not too familiar with. There is a cycle of cycling lands, a set of cycling lands printed in the set. So there will be more cycling things going on in Modern. I think it would be hard to actually get that many cycling cards in a draft deck because there's so many mechanics spread across the set that there's like not that many. Like if you have like a this mechanic matters card in your limited deck, it's pretty hard because there's 40 different mechanics in the set. Like there's no guarantee you'll get that many cycling cards. So I think Astral Drift will be drifting off alone in limited, and standard I'm not so sure. At minimum, it's 2 and a white, blink, target creature, draw a card. So I guess it's the fail case is not bad. Battle Screech, this card seems very good in limited. 2 white to make 2 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying, and it has flashback, which means it's kind of like Jumpstart. You can cast it from your graveyard by paying an additional cost. This cost is, instead of paying mana or anything, you just tap 3 untapped white creatures you control, and the fact that the first casting makes 2 untapped white creatures means, like, a lot of time, your opponents go, like, I don't know, they'll just, like, put 4 1/1 white flyers into play on turn 4, 2 of them untapped, 2 of them and some other creature tapped. Like, Battle Screech seems broken. Very, very strong. Dismantling Below, 2 and a white kicker, or 2 and a white instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and you can kick it for 6 total mana cost, white and blue, to draw 2 cards while also destroying target enchantment or artifact. Kind of an interesting Demystify. We'll see if that... It should be probably a pretty strong sideboard card in limited. I don't know if it'll crack constructed sideboards. I think the cheaper mana is more important than drawing so many cards in a lot of circumstances. The Slivers are back. 1 and a white for a 2/2 with Outlast 2. Oh, I see. Outlast 2 says, for 2 mana, tap this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can only do that as a sorcery. Other Sliver creatures you control have Outlast 2. Huh. I wonder what set Outlast came in. That's kind of interesting. The fact that you can only do it at sorcery and you have to tap the creature means it's kind of pretty slow ability, but as far as a 2 mana 2/2 is concerned, that's pretty sweet. It's like a strictly better 2 mana 2/2. That's kind of interesting. Ephemerate. Single white for an instant. Let's update my title now. Ephemerate. Single white for an instant. Exile target creature control. Then return it to the battlefield under its owner's owner's control, and it has rebound, which says basically the way rebound works is that at any point in the previous turn you cast this card, your next upkeep, you can then cast that card a second time without paying its mana cost. And it's only creatures you control, so you'd really want to have a lot of creatures with neat enter the battlefield abilities, which we're only 6 cards in, haven't seen yet, but who knows. Face of Divinity, 2 and a white, enchant creature, gets +2/+2. And as long as this is not the only aura attached to that creature, it'll gain first strike and lifelink. Huh. That's interesting. Auras, we'll see how many like hexproof creatures there are in the set, but I'm pretty hesitant to be that interested in Face of Divinity. First, Sliver's Chosen. 5 mana for a 3/3. Sliver creatures you control have Exalted. Exalted is a mechanic where if a creature you control attacks, and it's the only creature you control attacking, it'll get +1/+1 until end of turn for each. I'll just read the rules text. For each instance of Exalted among permanents you control. Exalted was a sweet mechanic from like Alara block. Noble Hierarch is a card in Modern that has Exalted that people see a lot of, but there's not a lot of other Exalted creatures kicking around these days. Giving all your Silvers Exalted is fun. Here's a rare. 4 mana enchantment. This is one of the cycle of like Force of so-on-so cards. If it's not your turn, you may exile a white card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. It's got Flash, and it says creatures you control get +1/+1. I think a pretty sweet card in Limited. Regardless, just a Flash Anthem effect is pretty powerful, and it stays in play afterward. And if you're desperate, you can even like run this out on turn 1 or something, exiling a card from your hand, although it's a steep cost to pay by exiling a second white spell. Generous Gift. 2 and white, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. I like the flavor on that, giving them a white elephant. Although it's a green elephant. It's white in the art and it's a white spell, but they didn't want to create a white elephant token because that's bizarre. I don't know, but interesting. It's very similar to... there's a green instant. 2 and a green, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. I can't think of the name of that card exactly. So it's a color-shifted version of that. Shouldn't really make a difference in Modern too much, but could be interesting this sealed in a limited format. Gilded Light. 1 and a white for an instant. You gain Shroud until end of turn. Has cycling too. So the reasons to give yourself Shroud would be to stop counter spells, stop burn to the face, or stop like some crazy Liliana ultimate or something. It's true, you do, like, another way to use these kinds of cards is to target your own creatures and upgrade like a 1/1 into a 3/3, or target your own creature in response to your opponent's removal spell and turn your creature that was going to be dead into a 3/3. So yeah, Generous Gift, it's interesting, but like those are pretty narrow cases. The fact that it can kill any permanent, including lands, planeswalkers, that sort of stuff, makes it pretty interesting. Giver of Runes, there's been a lot of talk about this because of its similarity to the legacy staple Mother of Runes. Giver of Runes is a single white for a 1/2, and it says tap another target creature you control against protection from colorless or from the color of your choice until end of turn. Mother of Runes is basically the same text, except it's a human, which is important. I think it's a 1/1, and it says target creature you control against protection from colorless. So Giver of Runes cannot save itself by giving itself protection, but if you have 2 Giver of Runes, they can save each other and whatnot. And the fact that it's not a human is important because humans, the modern deck humans, already has a lot of humans, and any more good humans could really push it over the top. But still a pretty interesting card. And could potentially see play in decks like the Devoted Druid combo deck, or like, yeah, I think that's probably a good spot for it. Or any sort of Death and Taxes deck that wants to assimilate sort of lock pieces in the form of creatures, like the little lion dude that makes it harder for your opponent to search their library, and like Thalia. You could assemble all these like creature lock pieces and use Giver of Runes to protect them all. So that's kind of neat. Or protect one of them from a spot removal spell. Imposter of the Sixth Pride, 1 and a white for a 3/1 Changeling. It seems like creature types have some impact in this set, so Changeling, the card is every creature type. A regular cohort, 4 mana for 2/2 with Changeling, also every creature type. When it enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So you make 4 power and 4 toughness across 2 bodies for 4 mana. We've had this card in recent, like, non-superpowered limited sets, which I'm thinking this one might be recently, and hasn't exactly been lights out crazy good, but a regular cohort and, say, King of the Pride is kind of fun, because Changelings count as cats, so you could, like, play King of the Pride, and the next turn make 2 4/3s. Yeah, so maybe there's, like, a creature type stuff that a regular cohort, or tokens, or a regular cohort, it was more interesting. Knight of Old Benalia, 5 mana for 3/3 with Suspend, another returning mechanic. Suspend is crazy. Suspend 5. Rather than cast this card from your hand, you may pay a single white and exile it with 5 time counters on it. Beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, cast it without paying its mana cost. It has haste. So you can just pay it for its mana cost for 5 mana, or you can suspend it. Well, yeah, I guess, well, King of the Pride won't be going into Standard. It'll only be going into Modern. This set is circumventing Standard. So, but certainly people could play Charmed Stray meme decks in Modern on Magic Online or in paper. Knight of Old Benalia. The other text, after the suspend part, when he enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. It is a nice effect. If you suspend this card, both you and your opponent will know exactly when Knight of Old Benalia will be coming into play and that effect will occur. So your opponent gets to play around it a little bit better. And it's also possible that like kill all the creatures that you have in play before the turn before Knight of Old Benalia would come out. But just having to spend 5 mana in an aggressive white deck might also be annoying. So I think it's a nice... The suspend turns, number of turns, and the mana cost are sort of nicely balanced. I think a so-so card for limited. It is a common after all. Lancer Sliver, 3 mana for 2/2. Sliver creatures you control have first strike. It's very plausible, particularly with all the changelings, which also count as slivers, that slivers will be a draft archetype in this limited format. And maybe like 3 or 4 or even 5 color slivers. Keep our eyes peeled on that. Martyr's Soul. Like, this by itself is a 3 mana 2/2 first strike is fine. If you have multiple slivers that maybe are enhancing each other, then it gets a little bit more curious and interesting. Martyr's Soul, 3 mana, 2 and a white for 3/2 with Convoke. When it enters the battlefield, if you control no tapped lands, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So if you've tapped 3 creatures, convoking out Martyr's Soul, you get a 5/4 for 3 mana instead of a 3/2. It's kind of neat. Certainly seems like there's going to be a go wide white creature strategy between cards like a regular Cohort, Force of Virtue, friggin' Battle Screech. So this could be a role player in those sorts of white decks. On Thin Ice, single white, enchant Snowland you control. When On Thin Ice enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until On Thin Ice leaves the battlefield. This is like Chained to the Rocks. Another evocative card from Theros. Chained to the Rocks said enchant mountain you control. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls and Chained to the Rocks leaves the battlefield. But this was like basically a 2-color card. You needed white mana to be able to cast it, and you needed a mountain to be able to enchant. On Thin Ice only gives you the requirement that you have white mana in your deck and you have snowlands. Now, there's full art snow-covered lands. So in order to have a snowland in your deck, I'm pretty sure you don't get to... Well, I don't know. I don't know if you get to add, at the conclusion of draft, whether you get to add a number of snowlands to your deck, sort of like how you can add basics, or whether you would actually have to draft snowlands in order to have snowlands in your deck. I don't really know. It'd probably be a little strange. I'm assuming you'll have to draft the lands to use the On Thin Ice. So it might not have a whole lot of targets in your deck to enchant in order to remove your opponent's best creature, but pretty impactful in Modern. because you can build decks with where every basic land and some non-basic lands you control are snow basics. And then you can have a nice little single white removal spell aura. Ranger Captain of Eos. This is harkening back to the Knight Captain of Eos? What are the other... What's the other... I thought he was also... I'm going to type in Captain of Eos. Well, there's Knight Captain of Eos, and there's just Ranger of Eos. Yeah, so this Ranger Captain of Eos is... it's like... This is weird art. Let's look at an older set. Should be that one. Yeah, this is Ranger of Eos, 4 mana, 3/2. When it comes into play, search your library up to 2 creature cards with converted mana cost 1 or less, reveal them, put them into your hand. Then, if you do, shuffle your library. And then Knight Captain of Eos, both from the same block, 5 mana, 2/2. You can sacrifice a soldier to prevent all combat damage to be dealt this turn. There's sort of both elements on Ranger Captain of Eos. Firstly, you can search your library for a card. Secondly, you can sacrifice him to prevent your opponent from casting non-creature spells. That's a pretty sweet card, and I could see this making... I can see this cracking modern decks. He is a human. Could be argued he could be played in humans. The 1-drops that you can get in a later game would be like... I can't think of the name of the cards right now. There's the Noble Hierarch, which is a human, mana accelerant, or you could get the little guy, the 1 mana 1/1 that grows every time you play human. Both not great to play on turn 4 necessarily, but you can't give up that kind of value. Just the fact that you can, say you have like a lethal board and you're passing the turn, you can, in your opponent's upkeep, before they can do anything, you can Ranger Captain of Eos to prevent them from casting like a board sweeper or a bunch of removal spells so that you can guarantee kill them next turn. And it's still a 3 mana 3/3 body for 3 that basically draws you a card. I think Ranger Captain of Eos is pretty strong, and I would expect to see this crop up in some modern decks. Recruit the Worthy. Single white with buyback 3. Create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So the way buyback works is you can pay the buyback cost whenever you cast this card, and instead of going to your graveyard as the spell resolves, it returns to your hand. So basically this is a 4 mana, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token at instant speed, and draw a card, and the card you draw is Recruit the Worthy. Like, you can, as long as you have the mana to spend, you'll never run out of 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. It's kind of like having a flipped oh, did I cut all the white weenie decks? No, there's a white weenie. It's kind of like having a flipped Legion's Landing, except not having to jump through the hoop of A, they're not lifelinkers, and B, you didn't have to jump through the hoop of attacking with 3 creatures at first. Probably not relevant for... Oh god, which tab did I have open? Probably not relevant for Constructed. Kill this. But could be interested in the limited format. Reprobation, 1 and a white, enchant creature, loses all abilities, and it's a coward creature with base power and toughness 0/1. Sort of the pacifism in the set. It's probably the fact that it gives it 0 power makes it it's like if you compare it to Kasmina's whatever the card Kasmina thing. Kasmina's Transmutation that's in the current War of the Spark set, which is decent, but leaves the creature with 1 power and is really bad in a set with all these +1/+1 counters. Reprobate seems better because A, instead of having a 1 power creature, it's 0 power, and, well, presumably there's not nearly as much +1/+1 creature importance in the set, so Reprobate will probably be reasonable. Rock's Veteran, 4 mana 2/4 with Battle Cry. Whenever he attacks, tap target creature and opponent controls. Well, that's actually pretty sweet. Battle Cry is an important mechanic from, I don't know, some Boros colored pair from years past. Whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature you control gets an additional power till end of turn. And Rock's Veteran will tap your opponent's blocker, and their best blocker, or any blocker, and yeah, this is a pretty sweet card. The fact that it's just a 2/4 is also means that it can probably survive multiple attacks where it's pumping your whole team and tapping a blocker. I think Rock's Veteran is going to be one of the better commons in white. Because it's 4 mana, you probably can't draft too many of them, but I'd probably be happy with 2 Rock's Veterans in every white deck I draft in this format, just based on what I've seen so far. Segovian Angel. A 1 mana 1/1 Flying Vigilance. It's sort of like a teeny tiny Serra Angel. I like this sort of tilt shift effect they've done to make the angel and or the background seem really small by making like the foreground blurry and focusing on Segovian Angel. It's kind of neat. We'll see if there's certainly this aura, Face of Divinity. Let's see if there's reasons to really benefit you from having a little 1/1 flyer. We looked at Serra the Benevolent at the very start of the format. Going to be very good and limited. 4 mana, 4 loyalty Planeswalker that spits out a Serra Angel for -3 and can make your flying creatures bigger. That part's a little less impactful, but better once you have a Serra Angel out. And the -6 is basically worship. I think Serra's going to be pretty good and limited. It's in Modern. May not make the cut. Might be like a 2 of sideboard card in some like white creature decks. Those Death and Taxes style of decks. Settle, although I think a Johnny that's in Standard right now is probably a better card in that same deck than Serra. Settle Beyond Reality, 5 mana, choose one or both. For 5 mana, sorcery. Exile creature you don't control. Exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So it's both it's one or both, either just a 5 mana sorcery creature removal exile, or you can also additionally blink one of your creatures, maybe can benefit from another battlefield trigger. That seems about par for removal spell. It seems like this set is not like overpowered like you might expect to see in like Modern Masters, this Modern Horizons, but it seems reasonable. Shelter. This is a reprint, I think. 1 and a white, target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, draw a card. Protection is a weird mechanic. It means your creature cannot be targeted by spells or abilities with a color of the color that you've given that creature protection from, and also they can't be blocked or dealt damage by cards or spells or abilities of that same color. So like Shelter, like giving a creature protection at instant speed, which also works for Giver Runes, by the way, can be very versatile and pretty interesting. Can temporarily make a creature unblockable, can protect it from removal, can make it a perfect chump blocker, or make it win a combat. So Shelter could be interesting. It doesn't increase its power, so it's not going to win. It's not going to like deal more damage to a creature or anything like that, but the fact that it also draws a card, I think Shelter will be like a card I'll be happy to play one of in every white deck I play. Sisay, Weatherlight Captain, 3 mana for a 2/2, gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. And for Wooburg, you can search your library for a legendary permanent card with converted mana cost less than Sisay's power, which again is being enhanced by the other colorful legendary permanents you control. Then you put that card on the battlefield and shuffle your library. I think that's too slow for Modern and too like finicky, relies on a creature living and stuff, but this could be maybe a fun cute card in EDH, Commander, Blitz, whatever these things are called now. Oathbreaker, there's all sorts of weird names. But yeah, I don't, probably not even that good in Limited and maybe useful in Modern. Or not, I would say not useful in Modern if I had to guess. Soul Strike Technique, 1 and white, enchant creature, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance. When an enchanted creature dies, you basically morph the top card of your library by manifesting. Manifesting, top card of your library goes into the battlefield face down as a 2/2. Your opponent doesn't get to know what it is. You get to look up at it any time, and you then have the chance to turn it face up at any time by paying the mana cost of the card that's face down if it's a creature card. Manifest is a neat ability, and that's the Grand Prix that me and my buddies top forward was the Manifest set, so that'd be fun to play with that again. People like Manifest and more if they're cool mechanics. Splicer's Skill, 3 mana, sorcery, create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. Hey JB Red Phoenix, how's it going? Yeah, your name is appropriate from what we were doing earlier, which was recapping my Mythic Championship Qualifier win with this Phoenix deck and playing a little bit of it. If you're super curious about that, you can go back and watch the start of the VOD. For right now, we're going through the Modern Horizons spoiler and looking at these cards. So we just talked about Splicer Skill. 3 mana to make a 3/3 Golem artifact is great. I would play that in every deck. Finished up a crazy match. Sweet. Was it standard or pauper? The other cool thing about Splicer Skill, it has the ability to splice this onto instant or sorcery. So the way that works is if you cast an instant or sorcery, such as, I think the best example maybe is Recruit the Worthy, or like a cheap, or like anything like Shelter. You cast like a cheap instant or sorcery, you can then reveal Splicer Skill or any card with Splice, reveal this card and pay the additional Splice cost, which is 4 mana, to get that effect, which is creating a 3/3 colorless Golem artifact creature token, added to the spell that you do actually spend from your hand, and then Splicer Skill gets to stay in your hand. So I think this card's going to be really quite good. On its surface, it's fine. Make a 3 mana 3/3 for 3. And being able to splice every so often is pretty sweet. Which you played, is it Drakes versus Merwin Elves? Which side of that were you on? I'm going to guess the Drakes. Next one is Stirring Address, 1 and white. Instant, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And it has, so that's pretty fair, but it's got Overload, which I think that came from the last Ravnica set before this War of the Spark block. For Overload, you can cast it for its Overload cost, and if you do, change its text. So you change the text of this card by replacing all instances of target with each. So instead of be each creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn, you basically pump your entire team for 6 total mana. It's a lot of mana, but interesting card. Trustworthy Scout, 2 mana 2/2, 1 and white. Exile this card from your graveyard, so after it's died or gone to your graveyard for some reason. Search your library for a card named Trustworthy Scout, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So if you have multiple Trustworthy Scouts, you can like basically draw one by exiling this from your graveyard. It's fine. Yeah, Overload is good. There used to be a card, I think the card that saw the most play in Return to Ravnica, where Overload was originally there, was Cyclonic Rift. It was 1 and a blue, return target non-land permanent you control. Oh, you don't control, yeah. You bounce your opponent's thing, like a Planeswalker or anything, at instant speed for 1 and a blue. And then for 7 total mana, you bounce all of their non-lands, so like all of their creatures, Planeswalkers, enchantments, artifacts, everything back to their hand. So Cyclonic Rift saw a fair amount of play in Standard. Overload can be a powerful mechanic if it's on the right card. There we go. Here's an interesting one. Valiant Changeling, 7 mana, 3/3, double strike with Changeling. It's also a shapeshifter. Changeling means it's every creature type. It says its spell costs 1 colorless mana less to cast for each creature type among creatures you control. This effect can't reduce the amount of mana this spell costs by more than 5. So basically, if you've got an elemental creature out, this is now, instead of 7 mana, it's 6 mana. 3/3 double strike. That's not super exciting. What is exciting is if you have another Changeling out. Like Imposter of the Sixth Pride or Irregular Cohort. Since Changelings count as every creature type, it's as though you've got every creature type that's ever been printed in Magic. You back to Lurkin? Well, thank you. I'll continue. Thanks for stopping by. We'll continue going through the set. But yeah, if you have another... if you have another Changeling out... Yeah. If you have another Changeling out, you reduce the spell by 5 colorless, and you basically have a 2 mana 3/3 double strike, which is incredibly powerful. So, Valiant Changeling, obviously, if you've got another Changeling that is in play and that has survived, then Valiant Changeling gets great. It is hard to cast a 1 mana Changeling. I don't know if there will be one in the set, so it will be pretty darn hard to get this guy out on turn 2, but you can conceivably see him coming out on turn 3 after you've played Imposter of the Sixth Pride, or turn 5 after you've played a regular Cohort. We'll see. We'll have to count all the Changelings that are in the entire set. I guess we're in the Kingdom Hearts set of music. Next we got Vesper Lark, which is reminiscent of Revel Lark, a card that I used to play a lot in my modern deck, my modern Birthing Pod deck back in the day. It was a very strange looking card. I still don't understand exactly what's happening in this art. It's like a bush with like eggs, and then it's got like angel wings. It's like an elemental. I guess it's a bush elemental. It's the weirdest card in the world. But it was 5 mana for 4/3. When it leaves the battlefield, you get to return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it had an evoke cost where you could guarantee that it would like enter the battlefield and die immediately. So Revelark used to be a cool part of the Birthing Pod combo deck in Modern, and then they banned Birthing Pod, and he's not seen a lot of play. Let's see what the his buddy looks like. Oh, good. Not that one. This one. Vesperlark. 3 mana for 2/1. When this card leaves the battlefield, return 1 target creature card with power 1 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it also has an evoke cost. So it's basically a much cheaper Revelark. It still has that weird, like, crazy bush with angel wings art aspect going on, which I appreciate. And yeah, it'll probably see some play. Particularly, well, Revelark was really nice in Birthing Pod decks because you could sacrifice it, get your Sun Titan, and also get cards back from your graveyard and do kinds of crazy stuff. You would want like some sort of Neoform or evolutionary thingy. I don't know, some way to sacrifice creature for value. Stone Life, what's happening? But Vesperlark's neat. We got Wall of 1,000 Cuts. Yeah, I saw that. The Russo brothers are producing a Magic the Gathering animated show for Netflix. It's kind of neat to maybe introduce more people to the story behind Magic the Gathering. Because there is some story elements. Every plane, they write a story. There was a pretty good story with this current one, The War of the Spark. The actual written literature seems sort of like young adult level of fiction, sort of like the sort of stuff I'm not really interested in, but I like that there's a lore behind all these things. In addition to being like a very complex, interesting card game, it's got beautiful art, it's got really neat lore, and there's always like a story behind cards. Magic's such a good game. Anyway, Wall of 1,000 Cuts, 5 mana for 3/5 Defender with flying, and for a single white you can turn off the defender, let him attack, which is pretty neat. I think it's reminiscent of Wall of Swords, old card that had the same sort of stuff going on. But yeah, I think Wall of 1,000 Cuts, pretty cool. Reasonable card. Winds of Abandon, 1 and a white, sorcery, rare. Excuse me. Alright, this is like Mega Path to Exile. Exile target creature you don't control. For each creature exiled this way, its controller searches their library for a basic land card, put those cards on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle their libraries. So for a single 1 and a white, you can just like sorcery speed, get rid of a creature no matter what, but they get a tap land in exchange. So if that was all the text said, it would probably never see play, because Path of Exile does the same stuff at instant speed for a single white mana instead of 2 mana. But Winds of Abandon also has Overload, where you can pay 6 total mana to exile all your opponent's creatures and give all of them lands. I don't know if Winds of Abandon will make any impact in Modern, but it could be pretty interesting and limited. Sometimes like you'll use it in the later game where them getting additional land is of no consequence, and the ability to like one-sided Wrath, like get rid of all their creatures, leave all your creatures in play, is pretty powerful. So I think Winds of Abandon will see play in limited, and it'll be a pretty decent card. Wing Shards. 1 white with Storm, instant. Target player sacrifices an attacking creature. When you any cards with Storm, when you cast a spell copied for each spell cast before it this turn, you may choose new targets for the copies. So if your opponent does the thing that I often do mistakenly, is like play a creature first main phase and then go to attack, you can Wing Shards and it'll get a Storm copy because your opponent playing that creature is casting a spell, so that'll get a copy from that, and then the Wing Shards itself will resolve, so you'll make your opponent sacrifice 2 attacking creatures. But overall, just a 3 mana to make your opponent sacrifice their worst attacking creature is probably reasonable. You can also do it after combat damage has resolved, because at the end of combat step, your opponent's creatures are still attacking. So you can block such that you kill off their worst creature, and maybe they have giant creatures that are still around. They can then wing shards, and maybe you use a combat trick, or they use a combat trick, and like, yeah, wing shards can maybe be interesting blowouts. I think wing shards will be reasonable. The fact that you can't clear a blocker out of the way with it, you can only make attacking creatures get sacrificed, is a little bit worse for the typical aggressive white deck, but not bad. And then we have Zul'Faryn Decoy, 1 and white for 1/3. Tap target creature, no other conditions, but you can only activate that ability if you had a creature enter the battlefield under your control this turn. So it's funny, Zul'Faryn Decoy is the kind of card that makes wing shards better, because like you're incentivized to cast creatures in your first main phase, so you can maybe tap things out of the way. And actually, Zul'Faryn Decoy is a lot worse than a typical tapper, because you can't use it strictly defensively on your opponent's turn unless you found some way to get a creature into play on your opponent's turn with like the Recruit the Worthy or something like that. So Zul'Faryn Decoy might be not great, because tappers are usually at their best when you use them on offense and defense. Blue. Archmage's Charm. Blue, instant. Choose one, counter target spell, target player draws 2 cards, or gain control of target non-land permanent with CMC 1 or less. It's an interesting modal card. I could actually see this making the cut in like some modern sideboard somewhere. Like a blue Tron deck or something crazy, I don't know. But just having the ability to like have an instant speed divination if you don't need to counter something, and or maybe take your opponent's stinking Giver of Runes or something like that. I think Archmage's Charm is pretty neat. It's definitely a card I would play in Limited, as long as I had a lot of blue sources. Yeah, like Archmage's Charm. Not exactly a bomb rare or anything, but a pretty good little card. Good timing for Aladdin to be in theaters presently. We got Bizarre Trade Mage. He even has a parrot friend, and he's riding a carpet. 3 mana for a 3/4 flyer. I see. This is why you're getting this crazy rate. When he enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. Then you have to discard 3 cards. So, like at the end of the day, you'll be down 1 card net. You're playing like a 3/4 flyer that when he enters the battlefield, you discard a card. Still probably pretty reasonable, and especially if you've just drawn 2 cards, it's probably like an additional basic land or some like 1-drop creature that's no longer relevant that you could discard. I think Bizarre Trade Mage is pretty decent. He's not a very good top deck. Well, he's a fine top deck, because you'll have like, it'll be the last card in your hand, you'll play him, you'll draw 2 cards, and immediately have to discard them. But you still have a 3/4 flyer at the end of the day. I think Bizarre Trade Mage is just fine. And if you've held 2 lands in your hand, then you'll actually get to keep some of those cards around. I think Bizarre Trade Mage is decent. Blizzard Strix, 5 mana for 3/2 flash flying. When he enters the battlefield, if you control another snow permanent, because it is a snowbird, exile target permanent other than Blizzard Strix, return that card at the beginning of the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. There's all these blink effects. Man, as a person who's chosen to call himself Blinky, I should probably like blink effects more in Magic, but I really don't that much. But there might be just enough end of the battlefield triggers to make these blink spells do something. This is the 3rd or 4th such effect we've seen so far in this card file. I like the look of the next one. Chiller Pillar, 4 mana 3/3 with 2 crazy things going on here. 4 snow monstrosity 2. What a crazy card. If you showed this to someone who hasn't played Magic in the last 3 years, they'd be like, what the hell is going on here? So Monstrosity 2 means you get to put, if the creature isn't already monstrous, you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So you basically get to... It's like Adapt that we had in Return to Ravnica. No, RNA, Ravnica Allegiance. It's like Adapt. You get to spend mana on a card to grow it, and you can only do it once. Although you can still monstrous a creature if it has another incidental +1/+1 counter on it. You have to track whether or not this creature has become monstrous. That's just kind of annoying. Adapt is like strictly better in the respect that it says if it has a counter on it, it can't put any more. Anyway, monstrous do. And then the snow thing. So you can tap any kind of snow mana to do this ability. Yeah, so usually that'll be a snow land. Interesting card. Oh, and it has flying if it's monstrous. Crazy. So it'll be for 10 total mana invested across 2 turns, you can have a 5/5 flyer. And these kinds of cards are really great and limited because they give you a sink for your mana after... They're decent early, like a 4-mana 3/3, and great late when you've run out of spells to cast and you're drawing off top of your deck, and then you can just monsters this guy. That is contingent on the fact that you need this snow mana. I don't have to figure out how prevalent, snow mana is going to be. Choking Tethers. 4 mana instant, tap up to 4 target creatures. It has cycling for 1 and a blue. And when you cycle Choking Tethers, you still get to tap target creature. That's pretty neat. Not a card you can have too many of in your deck, but a pretty neat card, and a pretty neat combination with something like this, where'd it go? Astral Drift, maybe. You're like cycling Choking Tethers, tapping one of their creatures, and then exiling one of the other ones till end of turn. Could be do some fun stuff with that. Cunning Evasion, 1 and a blue enchantment. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand. Huh. That helps the sort of like, you need to cast spells, you need to cast creatures with like Zephyr Decoy and stuff. You're repeatedly casting cards. Again, benefits you from having enter the battlefield triggers. And it's not, you're not locked into returning the creature to its owner's hand. You can choose to. Obviously, on its own, Cunning Evasion doesn't really do anything on its own. If you're behind, it does nothing. And if you're ahead, you're not going to get more ahead by having Cunning Evasion. But, so maybe a bit of a trap in that respect, but kind of a neat card. Echo of Eons, 6 mana sorcery, mythic. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. And it has flashback for 2 and a blue. So it's basically like, you don't untap any lands after it finishes resolving. So, unfortunately, your opponent will get the first crack with a brand new hand to do things. Yeah, this is a card I would probably avoid playing in Limited, unless you had some way of denying your opponent from drawing additional cards. Like a card like Narset in Echo of Eons is pretty bonkers, because you have Narset out, you cast Echo of Eons, your opponent shuffles their hand into their library and then doesn't draw any additional cards. Or they'll draw 1 card instead of 7. So you'll be up 6 cards on them. Because if you do it on your turn, your opponent hasn't drawn a card in your turn yet, so that you get 1 card draw, and then Narset will turn off the remainder. Yeah, so if you could play with like cards like Narset that can make this a non-symmetrical effect, Echo of Eons could be pretty powerful, but as is, I don't think I'd want to play it in Limited. And in Constructed, you'd have to build a deck around having those asymmetrical effects, so maybe you can put this in there. The fact that its flashback cost is cheaper than its casting cost makes it a little more excited in a deck that can intentionally put cards into its own graveyard. So Echo of Eons is interesting. Do some Tameo action, some Narset action. Everdream, 1 and a blue, instant, draw a card, splice onto instant or sorcery for 2 and a blue. So just like the previous splice card, you can basically make any of your instants and sorceries cost 3 more mana by splicing Everdream onto them and get you additional card draw. That's pretty neat. Exclude, 2 and a blue. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here exactly. Oh, it's like a weird spidery robot thing. And, okay, and it's half getting blued away. But yeah, it's just Essence Scatter with draw a card tacked on it for additional colorless mana. I think pretty good card in Limited, and the kind of card I'd probably be happy to play several of in my blue decks. Eye Kite, 1 and a blue for a 2 mana, 1/2 flyer. And it gains 2 power temporarily for the turn as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn. So you always draw 1 card on your own turn for your draw step, so you just need to find a way to draw 1 more card to give it power. If it's on your opponent's turn, you need something like Archmage's Charm to gain the 2 cards. But pretty neat. Fact or Fiction, a legendary card from Magic's past. 4 mana instant, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Your opponent then takes those 5 cards and makes 2 piles out of them. And you get to choose one of those 2 piles to put in your hand, the other goes to your graveyard. So very tricky card. There's been articles written, books written practically, chapters of books written about Fact or Fiction piles back when this was a much more relevant card in the Eternal formats and in Standard at the time. But pretty darn good for Limited and a lot of fun. It's basically, a lot of time it's like you get the best 2 cards, the top 5 cards of your library for the cost of 5 mana and a card, or 4 mana and a card that you cast at instant speed. So any card that says that is usually pretty good. And if your opponent makes a mistake or he doesn't exactly know what kind of cards that you need in that present moment, you can get even greater value than it would seem. So yeah, Fact or Fiction is a pretty sweet card. Fairy Seer, a single blue for a 1/1 flyer. When he enters the battlefield, scry 2. All right, pretty fair. Between Fairy Seer and Segovian Angel, there's 2 of these like cheap little flying guys that maybe if there's, there better be, well, they might be completely irrelevant, or maybe there'll be some crazy auras or static effects that can make them pretty neat. All right, Force of Negation, 1 blue for an instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than play this spell's mana cost. And you could basically negate, counter target non-creature spell, and if you do counter a spell, you exile it. Force of Negation, pretty darn good card. This is going to shake up Modern a fair amount, I think. It may not be a main deck inclusion in some decks, but it'll certainly be a consideration for a lot of blue sideboards to be able to interact with decks like Ad Nauseam or Storm, or decks that kind of go off at instant speed with non-creatures. Future Sight, 2 blue for an enchantment. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library. It's kind of like Experimental Frenzy, except without the drawback that you can no longer cast cards from your hand. So yeah, Future Sight is great. Insane in Limit. Like I would say a bomb rare in Limited if you can survive, and everyone's familiar with this card from like EDH and stuff. I don't know if I probably won't see Constructed Modern play, but pretty sweet Limited card. I like the art. It's very, you get the rising sun and the like crescent moon. You get skulls and stuff. No, it's very exciting. A fetus. What's happening here? Iceberg Cankrix. What's he holding there? Like an ice cube? I don't know what he's got in his hand. 1 in blue for an 0/4. Oh, he's like Hedron Crab. Whenever another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target player put the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Probably will be hard to get a mill thing going, but interesting all the same. 2 mana 0/4. Classic Mana War. 2 in a blue for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature to its owner's hand. These cards are always good and limited. Excellent tempo play. I'll play every Mana War I can possibly draft in my blue decks. And it'll probably be a reasonably high pick. It'll probably be one of the better blue comments if I had to guess. Merit Lage's Slumber, 1 in a blue, legendary snow enchantment. Whenever Slumber or another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more snow permanents, sacrifice this enchantment. If you do, you create Merit Lage, a legendary 2020 black avatar creature token with flying and indestructible. So basically, in Constructed, if you play this and like 9 snow lands, you get a 2020 indestructible flyer. And each time you play a land, or any other snow permanent, you get to scry 1 while this is in play. It's kind of neat. We'll see if this sees much play. Again, I have to figure out the whole snow lands thing in the limited format, but it's unlikely you'll be able to get 10 snow permanents in a limited deck unless you go hardcore for it, so we'll see about Merit Lage's Slumber for limited, but a pretty interesting card overall. Mirrodin Besieged, 2 and a blue. That was the name of a set, wasn't it? They named a card after a set? I didn't think that was something they've ever done before. Yeah. Well, now the Google search results for Mirrodin Besieged will be more confusing. Huh. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Oh, I guess there's Time Spiral the card and Time Spiral the magic block, so which a lot of these cards are actually calling back to. So here's Mirrodin Besieged the card. 2 and a blue, enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, choose Mirrodin or Phyrexian. Those were the two warring factions during Mirrodin Besieged. Mirrodin says, whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. And Phyrexian says, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then discard a card. Then, if there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. Huh. Weird. It's also reminiscent of the Khans of Tarkir, I think, block cards that let you choose Khans or dragons. I really like this card. It's really neat. I don't think it's good. It's probably not that good. Certainly limited, and probably not in well, let's see. When we get to the artifacts, we'll see how many artifacts there are. But interesting card all the same. Mist Syndicate Naga. 3 mana for 2/1, or 3 mana for 3/1. Ninjutsu, which is 2 and a blue. Let's read it. Whenever this guy deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it. Wow, that could start going off. Ninjutsu says, for 2 and a blue, you can return an unblocked attacker you control to your hand and put this card onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking instead. So basically, you attack with a bunch of creatures, and if you're one of the unblocked creatures, you like pay 3 mana and swap this one out. You get this guy into play, and then you get a 3/1 token copy. That's a pretty powerful effect. And if for whatever reason you get like 2 attacks in, there's no coming back from your opponent. You just be making all these free 3/1s, going crazy with it. Moonblade Shinobi, 4 mana for a 3/2. The important part is the ninjutsu cost. Like that's the gatekeeper for its ability to be like a modern staple or anything. Moonblade Shinobi, also ninjutsu, 3 mana. Also this time a 3/2. Whenever that deals combat damage to a player, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying, which would help you connect with subsequent ninjutsu cards, but you'd need more of them. Obviously, the difference between a common and a rare is, in terms of power level, is demonstrated, but still a neat card overall. Onerophage. 4 mana, 1/2, flying. Whenever you draw a card, put +1/+1 counter on Onerophage. So on your next turn, it'll be a 2/3 flyer for 4. And the turn after, 3/4, etc., etc. I think a reasonable card. And if you have additional random card draw in your deck, or even better, if you can like play this and in the same turn do some effect, sacrifice some creature, connect with your... Actually, I'm getting confused. I don't know. If you find some way to draw a card without spending mana on turn 4 to turn this immediately into a 2/3, it gets all more interesting. But I think Onerophage is a fine card. Phantasmal Form, 2 and a blue. Like if you have a Mirrodin Besieged in play naming Phyrexian, you get to immediately grow an Onerophage on your end step. Phantasmal Form, 2 and a blue. Until end of turn, up to 2 target... It's an instant. Up to 2 target creatures each have base power and toughness 3/3, gain flying, and become blue illusions in addition to their other colors and types, and you draw a card. So this is something, in a pinch, you can target your opponent's creatures. You could target one of your creatures and one of your opponent's creatures to have the 2 creatures trade in combat. You could target 2 of your own creatures to suddenly have sort of 3/3 flyers out of nowhere. You can basically make your own creatures bigger, your opponent's creatures smaller, and you draw a card for all that, all for 3 mana. I would probably play one of these in any blue deck I have. It's a very interesting effect, and it's hard to really get too upset when you draw a card at the end of the day. Phantom Ninja, 1 blue for an illusion ninja. Phantom Ninja can't be blocked. Yeah, I think this is reminiscent of like a whole bunch of old cards, but a fine card. Unblockable 2 mana or 3 mana 2/2. Not great. Pondering Mage. This is sort of the art from the card Ponder, and this must be the mage who is conducting that pondering. 5 mana for 3/4. When he enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order. You may shuffle. Yeah, so it's basically a 5 mana 3/4 creature with Ponder stapled to it. That's kind of neat. I think this is a reasonable card to be played in your limited decks. Prohibit. 1 of the blue with kicker 2. Counter target spell if its converted mana cost is 2 or less. If you pay 4 mana instead, you can counter target spell if its current mana cost is 4 or less instead. This is a pretty bad card. Because at no point will you be able to counter a spell that more mana was spent to cast the spell than it is spent to cast Prohibit. Well, yeah, because you can't, like, the beauty of counter spells and blue magic in general is you get the downside of having to hold up this mana on your turn and like having this card that you can't proactively affect the board state. The trade-off is you get to usually trade your card and your mana for a card and more mana that your opponent played. So that's why counter spells are usually pretty good. I think Prohibit is pretty bad, and I probably don't want to play it in limited, and probably won't see it at all in modern. Reign of Revelation, 4 mana, instant, draw 3 cards, then discard a card. Okay. Looks like there's going to be a lot of card draw in blue, as you might expect. Rebuild, 2 in a blue, instant, return all artifacts to their owner's hands. And then this has cycling too. It's kind of like Hurkyl's Recall, except it's symmetrical. Hurkyl's Recall says target player returns all artifacts to their owner's hands. Now, Hurkyl's Recall is blue-blue, I think, or possibly blue and colorless. Still instant, but this one has cycling. Rebuild is kind of interesting. There is sort of a potential combo deck that wants to play a bunch of cheap artifacts, return them all to their hand, do it again. So there might be, and then do some like storm action. So there might be something going on with Rebuild to empower a deck. But they are also putting Flusterstorm into Modern with this set, so maybe Storm decks will be pushed out of the format anyway. Interesting card. Scour all possibilities. Oh, in limited, probably basically worthless in limited, but more interesting for constructed. Scour all possibilities. 1 in a blue. Sorcery. Scry 2, then draw a card. Okay. Get to look at basically the top 2 cards or a random card off the top to find the card, and then for 5 mana you can flash it back. Yeah. It's a sorcery, a little bit slow, but it's kind of reminiscent of Radical Idea. A fine card. I wouldn't call it crazy or anything. Here we go. 4 times a charm. Fine card. Scour all possibilities. Scuttling Sliver. It's only the like 3rd sliver we've seen. 3 mana, 2/2. Sliver. It gives all sliver creatures you control have 2 mana. Untap this creature. Okay, a relatively minor effect. Slivers on their own are usually like not super inconsequential. It's when you have a whole bunch of slivers in play with a whole bunch of different effects that are stacking on all the slivers that it starts to like snowball and get out of control. Smoke Shroud. 1 in a blue for an aura. Enchant creature. Enchant creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. Whenever a ninja enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Smoke Shroud from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to that ninja. Cool. I guess. Plays well with the ninjutsu mechanic, obviously. And ninjas, excuse me. It has the ability to recur from the graveyard under the right circumstance, so I think this is fine. A fine card, not one I'd be looking to play in any blue deck. I'd want the right kind of blue deck with a lot of ninjas to play this, but also cards that really care about getting +1/+1 and flying, so medium card. Smoke Shroud. Spell Snuff. 1 blue for an instant, counter target spell. So it's basically like having cancel, except it's got this additional text, Fateful Hour, which I think came from an Innistrad block. If you have 5 or less life, you get to draw a card, which is a pretty cool card. I think I would play Spell Snuff in any Modern Horizons sealed I play, and I would probably be interested in playing this in draft too, so pretty neat. Stream of Thought, blue. Sorcery, target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. You shuffle up to 4 cards from your graveyard into your library. And has Replicate 2 blue blue. Whenever you cast a spell copied for each time you paid its replicate cost, you may choose new targets for the copies. So what you can do with this is if you have enough blue mana, you can cast it many, many times, all with one single copy of a card. I think the most likely use case for this is going to be only in Limited, not in Modern Constructed. And it'll be spending 5 mana, 2 colorless, and 3 blue to mill your opponent for 8 cards, and basically win by decking through that. So to keep our eyes open for like a mono blue, like control deck in Limited, just like there was in Ravnica Allegiance Limited. Was it Ravnica Allegiance? Yes. That uses Stream of Thought as the win con. String of Disappearances. Single blue, instant, return target creature to its owner's hand, then a creature's controller may play blue blue. If the player does, they may copy the spell and may choose a new target for that copy. So you bounce either your own or your opponent's thing. They can play, either you or they play blue blue, copy it again, then they do that, and then I'm presuming that the other player, the same player, can then choose to play blue blue, copy, Lots of bouncing going on. It's kind of reminiscent of Chain Lightning, but for bouncing things. If we look up, how do we go back to, oh, it's right there. If we look up Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning said, deal 3 damage to any target, then that player or that permanent's controller may pay red red and copy, etc. and so on. So it's like a bouncing Chain Lightning. It's kind of neat. Tribute Mage, 2 and a blue for 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 2. Reveal that card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. It's similar to Tinker Mage, who can get cards with CMC 1 or less and put into your hand, and Treasure Mage, which can get artifact cards with CMC 6 or more put into your hand. Tribute Mage is sort of slotted in the middle there. Could be interesting. We'll have to see what kind of artifacts are in the set. There's at least a few cards now that care about artifacts. Twisted Reflection, 1 and a blue. Choose 1. Target creature gets -6 power until end of turn. Or switch target creature's power and toughness till end of turn. And if you pay the Entwine cost, which I think makes this cost 3 mana, a 1 colorless blue and black, you get to reduce the power of their opponent's creature and then switch their power and toughness, which will often mean they have negative toughness at that stage and will die. Decent little card. I'm reasonably fond of these. Target creature gets like -X power until end of turn. A lot of the time they have draw a card stapled onto them though. But Twisted Reflection in a blue-black deck, I could probably see playing a couple copies of it in Limited. Probably wouldn't play too many copies in just a non-blue-black deck. Okay, here's a mythic. Urza, Lord High Artificer. 2 blue for a mythic legendary creature, 1/4. So much text here. When he enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with. This creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So that creature will, no matter what, be a 1/1 if you have an empty board. Urza says, tap an untapped artifact creature you control. Tap an untapped artifact you control, add blue mana. So immediately you can play Urza, make a construct, tap the construct, add a blue mana, or any other artifacts you control, add mana. For 5 colorless, shuffle your library, then exile the top card. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. It's weird dude, this Urza, Lord High Artificer. Lets you turn untapped artifacts into blue mana, and lets you, if you have a tremendous surplus of mana, you can start like trying your luck at putting cards from the top of your library into play for the heavy investment of 5 mana. And it makes like a weird artifact that grows for each artifact you control. I don't think there's a deck for this in Modern Constructed, but and may not even be a deck for this in Limited. At worst, you've got a 1/4 and a 1/1 for 4 mana with the ability to sort of pseudo-slowly draw cards in the late game. Like, it's not the worst, but it's okay. Watcher for tomorrow. 1 and a blue. Human Wizard. Hideaway. I don't remember what Hideaway does. When it leaves the battlefield, put the exiled card into its owner's hand. What does I have to read this exiled thing? Hideaway. When this creature enters the battlefield tapped, when it this creature enters the battlefield tapped. When it does, look at the top 4 cards of your library. Exile 1 of them face down and put the rest on the bottom of your library. So if this creature dies, you get to draw the best card of your top 4, and it also enters the battlefield tapped. Yeah, it's like okay, not crazy. It is fun with blink effects. This is the first card that I'm like, yes, let's blink this card, because you get to play it tapped. Look at the top 4, you blink it with some effect, you immediately get the card exiled, and then it gets to do it all over again, looking at the next top 4 and getting another card, and so on. So there's a card you'll actually want to blink. If you do blink it, though, you'll rarely have an opportunity to attack or block with it, because it keeps entering the battlefield tapped, but it's still pretty neat. Windcaller Aven. 6 mana, flying, 4/3. With cycling for a blue, you can discard it from your hand and draw a card, random card instead of it. Should you cycle Windcaller Aven, target creature you control gains flying until end of turn. That's pretty neat. I like cycling effects. They're really hard to play around, so I have to keep that in mind. If anyone who has blue mana can surprise you out of nowhere and give your creature flying. Winter's Rest, 1 and a blue. They do have to pay mana at least. 1 and a blue, enchant creature. Winter's Rest enters the battlefield tapped. Enchanted creature, as long as you control another snow permanent, enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untapped step. Alright, it's sort of like a narcolepsy or something like that, but you need another snow permanent to make it work. There's Flusterstorm. So, Flusterstorm is a box topper. It won't be in booster packs. Looks like it's 255 out of 254. So don't have to worry about that for limited, but for constructed, it's important to know that there's now a card that's really great against Storm. Flusterstorm is the counter to Storm. You fluster all the storm. Black. Azra Smokeshaper. 4 mana for a 3/3 with ninjutsu again. When it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn, and it can target itself. That's a really sweet card. So, if you have an unblocked creature, you get to save another creature with indestructible. That's the only way you can really flash them in at instant speed. But you could just play first main phase and be able to, I don't know, have a attacker. I don't know, I think it's just it's not like insane card, but it's very reasonable for a 4 mana 3/3 with some neat text on it. I like it. Here's Cabal Therapist. This is one of the first cards that got spoiled for Modern Horizons at the original product announcement. It's a menace 1/1. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may sacrifice a creature. When you do, choose a non-land card name, and then target player reveals their hand and discards all cards with that name. So the way this would work, say you have like a token out, you sacrifice the token, and if you haven't looked at your opponent's hand yet that game, you just choose like the scariest card they could potentially have for your whatever you're playing against. Maybe you just name like Scapeshift. You just name like a random card that you really don't want them to have, or maybe you don't want them to have next turn. Then you get to look at their hand. If they don't have any of the copies of the card, oh well, you've traded your token for the ability to see your hand. The next turn, then things get way more powerful, because then you'll know the cards that are currently in their hand and actually be able to make them discard. Cabal Therapist will be pretty interesting and potentially very powerful. And the fact that it's very cheap too is pretty interesting. And it has menace, so it's like a little relevant attacker too. I think Cabal Therapist will probably make the cut in some modern deck or another. Carrion Feeder. This is a reprint, I think. Single black, 1/1. Can't block. Sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. And the fact that you don't have to spend mana to do the sacrifice is pretty powerful. If you attack with a bunch of creatures in your Carrion Feeder, maybe it's a situation where you can sacrifice, and they don't block Carrion Feeder, maybe you can sacrifice all those creatures and make Carrion Feeder gigantic. We'll have to see. In order for this card to be interesting for limited, you'll definitely need to have creatures dying matters or sacking creatures matters cards. Okay, more changelings. This is actually a 1 mana changeling, which plays well with the... Oh no, not super well, because it's 1 mana for black, with that 7 mana white card that was actually white. Anyway, changeling outcast, black for 1/1. Can't block and can't be blocked. There you go. People... This will probably be overvalued by people. Probably won't be as good as people think it is, unless there's a lot of benefit from the changeling aspect. We shall see. Cordial Vampire. Black for 1/1. Whenever he or another creature dies of any stripe, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. Again, changelings are vampires, and there's immediately some interest in additional benefit, potentially, that changing outcast. In limited, if you can get enough vampires, Cordial Vampire will be great. Especially since it counts your creatures or your opponent's creatures. Not too keen on constructed. There's not too many playable vampires at the present moment, and tribal decks, save for apparently humans, are pretty powerful to go off with. I'm hesitant to think Cordial Vampire will be that good in Modern. Here's Crypt Rats. This might be a reprint. 3 mana for 1/1 for X. Crypt Rats. The creature does X damage to each creature and each player. You can only spend black mana on X. So, like, it'll suicide, and for, like, black, you can deal 3 damage to each creature and player. Yeah. And presumably, because itself costs 3, your opponent will have, like, a 1-turn window to kill Crypt Rats before you make that play. Interesting card, Crypt Rats. It's probably going to be decent in limited. Dead of Winter. 2 and a black sorcery. All non-snow creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of snow permanents you control. A pretty cool, like, languish kind of effect for mono. Well, I guess not mono black, like black decks in Modern. This might. There's going to be a lot more snowlands in being played in Modern. I can guarantee that. Might see a little bit of play in Modern Constructed. Defile. A single black instant. Target creature gets -1/-1 till end of turn for each swamp you control. It's that's a lot of competition for Defile. There's things like Tragic Slip and Bile Blight and all kinds of stuff that are competing with Defile. I would expect this to not see play in Constructed, but being a fine and potentially a very good card in limited decks. Diabolic Edict. Target player sacrifices a creature. Again, we've had like Liliana's Triumph in the current War of the Spark. This card is usually never very good in limited. Dragscape Sliver. 1 and a black, 2/2. Each Sliver creature card in your graveyard has Unearth 2. Unearth is a mechanic where you can return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield, and it has haste. And you exile it at the beginning of the end step. Yeah. It is an interesting mechanic if you are playing a lot of slivers, because your opponent will start like killing your slivers, and you really want a critical mass of slivers, although you'll only get the slivers you unearth for 1 turn. Not super exciting. It's still a 2 mana 2/2 at the end of the day, at least. What is going on here? Endling. 4 mana zombie shapeshifter. 3/3. For black, it gains menace till end of turn. For black, it could gain death touch till end of turn. For black, it can gain Undying until end of turn. That's really neat. Undying is a mechanic where if a creature would die, if it has no counters on it, it'll instead return to the battlefield under its own control with a counter on it. That's really, really cool. Endling. And for colorless, it gets additional power at the expense of a toughness, or an additional toughness at the expense of a power until end of turn. I think Endling is really, really neat. It's obviously a callback to Morphling. I think Endling will approach like bomb-ish status for Modern, or for the limited format. It won't be played in any constructed deck, but it'll be really neat limited, and like a fair-ish bomb at the same time. Feaster of Fools. 6 mana 3/3 flying with Convoke, so you can tap creatures to reduce the mana cost of this. And it has Devour 2. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice any number of creatures, and for each creature it's sacrificed, you get 2. You get twice that many +1/+1 counters on it. Basically, if you sacrifice 2 creatures, you get 2 times 2 counters on it. It'll be like a friggin' 7/7 flyer. So Feaster of Fools can really turn the table quite quickly. Pretty nice with like tokens, both in the fact of Convoke and Devour, probably really good with Battle Screech. Although Battle Screech doesn't need much help to be any better. First Sphere Gargantua. That is a terrifying spider. I assume it's some sort of Phyrexian abomination. Maybe it's not a spider per se. It's just some like crazy zombie thing. It's terrifying overall. It is indeed a horror. 6 mana, 5/4. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose a life. This is very reminiscent of the like 6-drop in War of the Spark. And it has Unearth, 2 and a black. Just talked about Unearth. Yeah, it's a pretty sweet card. Terrifying. I would probably play 1 in any black deck in this in the limited format, based on my impression of what I've seen so far. Force of Despair, 1 black, instant, destroy all creatures that enter the battlefield this turn, and if it's not your turn, you may exile a black card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. It's a neat card. It can only, it only works on creatures that enter the battlefield this turn. You'll always probably be able to use it in limited, but it won't, the choices for what to destroy will be much more reduced, or limited, if you will. Interesting card, that Force of Despair. I think it's going to be a reasonably high pick, and might see play in constructed sideboards. Yeah. Gluttonous Slug, 1 and a black for an 0/3 with Menace and Evolve. I see. Whenever a creature you control enters the battlefield with power more than the evolved creature, if it's greater power or toughness, then you get to put an additional counter on it. So you play this as an 0/3. Next turn you play a creature with any power at all. This guy will get a power on him. It would be a 1/4. And then you hope to keep playing creatures bigger than Gluttonous Slug on some dimension, either power or toughness, and to continue to grow it. I think it's going to be okay, but not super exciting. Grave Shifter. This is the card I was looking at when I spaced out for a second. So this is, it's got the art of Grave Digger, and it's even 4 mana 2/2. But it's a play on Grave Digger. It's a changeling. When Grave Shifter enters the battlefield, you return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, so it is just Grave Digger, but it's just a changeling Grave Digger, and that's why it's a Grave Shifter, because it's a shapeshifter. Weird. There must be creature type stuff. I guess it helps the Sliver stuff work, helps the vampire stuff work. Headless Spectre, 3 mana 2/2 flying. With Hellbent, whenever your hand is empty, you have no cards in your hand. Headless Spectre, if it should deal combat damage in that state, that opponent will discard a card at random. Well, the fact that you have to have no hand means it's probably at the stage of the game where your opponent may also have no hand, so the whole random discard isn't as useful as it might otherwise be. But still pretty neat. Mind Rake. This is probably more important for EDH or something, but it's basically Mind Rot. 3 mana sorcery, target player discards 2 cards, but it has an overload cost. Oh, I see. So normally overload costs more because you're doing some powerful effect, but in this case, it costs less than the original cost because now it would be each player discards 2 cards. So you'd play this, removing a card from your hand, and you'd have to discard 2 more cards. So you'd pay 3 cards to make your opponent discard 2. Obviously better if you are empty-handed and your opponent does have cards. Interesting Mind Rake. Mind Rake, very interesting. I'll often play, draft a Mind Rot in the later stages of a draft just to have in my sideboard against, controlling sorts of limited decks. I could see me playing Mind Rake and potentially getting benefit of the overload cost. Mob. 5 mana instant, Convoke, destroy target creature. Oh, that's probably gonna be the best black combat in this set. It'd probably, on average, you'd probably be a 3.8 mana cost, destroy target creature at instant speed over the course of the format. Neat. Or maybe it's closer to 4.3 mana, because you can't always afford to tap your creature to reduce the cost, but pretty neat overall. Nether Spirit, 1 black for a 2/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Nether Spirit is the only creature in your graveyard, you return it to the battlefield. Oh, that's really neat. Harder to pull off in limited because you basically always need to play 10 creatures in your limited decks, so unlikely for Nether Spirit to be the only creature in your graveyard, but it might be something neat with regards to that. The fact that it's at your upkeep, not your end step, means it will always be summoning sick to turn it enters the battlefield, but Neat all the same. Nether Spirit. I'm not a very high pick in limited. The big card you'd be like, okay, I've got a Grey Ogre. It may in fact just be worse than many other creatures in your limited deck, unless you have some way to eat some of the other creatures out of your graveyard that have been put into there. Ninja of the New Moon, 5 mana, 6/3 with Ninjutsu 4, and that's it. It's just like a surprise, deal 6 damage instead of maybe 1 that you thought you were taking for 4 mana. That's kind of neat, I guess. Man, Ninjutsu's gonna get some people. Hopefully it's not in all 5 colors. I think it's only in blue and black. Plague Engineer. Oh, this one's kind of neat. 3 mana for 2/2 with Death Touch, and when he enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type your opponents control get -1, -1, -1. So you can play this, name human, and all your opponent's humans will forever be -1, -1, and maybe completely wreck them. So like if you manage to get this down before your opponent has played like their Thalia's lieutenants and their other dudes, then they are suddenly have very few creatures that will actually survive just entering the battlefield, like Plague Engineer. Probably decent limited, and probably going to be impactful in constructed sideboards. Putrid Goblin, 1 and a black for 2/2 with Persist. So if it dies, it's the opposite of Undying. If it comes, when it dies, it'll come back to the battlefield with a -1, -1 counter on it. This is one of the first times that there will be -1, -1, and +1/+1 counters in the same format. They often try to avoid combining those two, and it just so happens when a -1, -1 counter meets a +1/+1 counter, they annihilate like matter and antimatter. So weird one with Putrid Goblin. We'll have to look for that. Otherwise, like a vanilla 2/2 with like a minor return ability, a decent creature to like sacrifice to something. Rank Officer, 4 mana, 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. For 1 in black, exile a creature card from your graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. Well, there's a way to manipulate the creatures in your graveyard for Nether Spirit's sake, but this card doesn't look so good. It's 4 mana for a 3/1, and if you want to get that 2/2, you have to discard a card, and the tap ability is pretty minor. Pretty low on Rank Officer. Ransack the Lab. 1 in a black for sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. My mind's broke, and we're back. Put 1. Alright, it's just like, helps you fill up your graveyard, takes the best card of the top 3. It's fine. Return from... I probably wouldn't... It's the kind of card that often doesn't make the cut for me in limited decks. Probably wouldn't make the cut. Return from Extinction. 1 in a black, sorcery. Oh, these are slivers. Choose 1. Return target creature card from your hand, graveyard to your hand. Return 2 target creature cards that share creature type from your graveyard to your hand. Okay. This is like type of effect that's been printed in black in like every limited set, and as long as you can get the 2 creatures, it gets a lot more interesting. Sadistic Obsession. 4 mana, aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature has black, tap, put a -1, -1 counter on target creature. So you basically turn your creature into like a little removal spell on a stick. The fact that you're now making your creature a very juicy target for removal that would trade your opponent's 1 card for your 2 cards means this is not great. It doesn't enhance your creature beyond this thing. Putting on a Death Touch creature doesn't make any difference, like some of these type of effects would, where they deal damage, where you can kill a creature of any size. This one just shrinks. I'm not too high on Sadistic Obsession. Shatter Assumptions. 1 black, sorcery. Choose 1. Target opponent reveals their hand and discards all colorless non-land cards. Weird anti-artifact hate. Oh. Or, excuse me, target opponent reveals their hand and discards all multicolored cards. I'm gonna say unplayable and limited because of just how unlikely it is to do very much. But it might be interesting in constructed, particularly the colorless side of things. Take a big chunk out of Affinity's hand, although their hand is probably already empty at that stage. Yeah, not a huge fan of Shatter. Well, I think it's a really cool card, but I don't think it'll be very powerful in any format. Silumgar Scavenger. Oh, it's got knees. It's like a vulture with person legs. It's terrifying. 5 mana, 2/3 flying with exploit. How does exploit work? I think whenever you cast a card subsequent to you having an exploit permanent in play, you could play an additional colorless mana to drain your opponent for 1. Nope, I was completely wrong. I was thinking of extort. I was thinking of extort, not exploit. Exploit says whenever this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Silumgar Scavenger. It gains haste until end of turn if it exploited that creature. I see. You can make this a 3/4 haste. That's a weird phrasing. It gains haste if it exploited that creature? That's weird. Oh, I see. I'm confused. Whenever it's got two sort of aspects to it. It's got a permanent effect where whenever a creature you control dies, put a counter on it. And if the creature was dying by you exploiting that creature at the very beginning, you'll get a counter and it'll get haste. That's really neat. Probably like a one of in most black decks. Not something I'd take very highly, but kind of neat. Sling Gang Lieutenant. 4 mana, 1/1. Enters the battlefield to create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. It says sacrifice a goblin, target player loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. It's sort of like a much worse Siege Gang commander, but at the end of the day, it's still 3 1/1s for 4 mana and plays really nicely with Devour cards, Convoke cards, Exploit. Yeah, I like Sling Gang Lieutenant. Smiting Helix, 4 mana, sorcery, deal 3 damage to any target, you gain 3 life, and has flashback for Lightning Helix mana. That's fine. Fine little card there. For limited. Throat Seeker, 3 mana for 3/2. Unblocked attacking ninjas you control have lifelink. I guess, they like having their ninjas, climbing up walls and stuff. So, yeah, a fine-ish card. It's still a 3 mana 3/2, and like, it'll help like make racing you pretty hard if you're in like a blue-black ninjutsu kind of deck. As long as you're getting ninja stuff going, it's okay. This with like Throat Seeker plus Ninja of the New Moon is quite a life sling. You have this guy out, and maybe not even attacking with him, and you attack with some flyer, and then trade out the flyer for the ninja and deal 6, gain 6. Umezawa's Charm. I see, this is just a handsome gentleman being charming. 1 in a black, instant choose 1. Okay, this is reminiscent of Umezawa's Jite. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or you gain 2 life. That's cute. I'd probably see playing one of these in a black deck in limited. Undead Augur, black, 2/2. Whenever Undead Augur, another zombie you control dies, you draw a card and lose 1 life. Yeah, fine little card. Another card that doesn't mind being sacrificed. Oh, you lose a life every time those creatures die. Oh, it's only when your zombies die you draw a card. A little bit worse, but still, it's like a 2/2 that could trade for your opponent's 2/2 and draw a card and lose life. I'm okay with that. Unearth. Original card is Cycling. Black, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and recycling 2. That's kind of neat. I don't know if that's been in Modern yet, or if this is brand new to Modern. Might have some impact. This could be, actually, if it is the first time it's being printed in Modern, this could be a very impactful card. If you can, like, fill your graveyard quickly and then use Unearth to pull it back, this could be neat. Venomous Changeling, 3 mana, 1/3 Death Touch. That's a Changeling. Pretty cool. I like a 3 mana, 1/3 Death Touch, and the additional upside of maybe having Zombie or Ninja or Goblin synergy. Could be neat. Wart Eye Witch. Does she have warts on her eyes? Maybe. 3 mana for 3/2. Whenever it or another creature you control dies, scry 1. Okay. It's fine. Yawgmoth Thran Physician. I don't know if Yawgmoth has ever been immortalized in a card before. Their name is invoked in many flavor texts and cards. 4 mana, 2/4. It is itself a human cleric. It has protection from humans, and you can pay 1 life and sacrifice another creature, and you can put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. And for black, discard a card. You could proliferate, meaning you could make an additional -1/-1 counter. You have to pay costly. You have to pay cards or creatures to use any of these abilities. Otherwise, it's a vanilla 2/4. Just about vanilla 2/4 with the ability to have protection from humans. At least the sacking of a creature draws you a card, so that you can then use the discard ability later. Yawgmoth is interesting. I might be undervaluing him, but not too excited by him for both constructed nor the limited format. We're into red. Time for a drink. This set comes out, by the way, on Thursday on Magic Gathering Online. So we will be drafting this set as early as Thursday. Alpine Guide, 3 mana, 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a mountain card, put that card on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Oh, I see. And then Alpine Guide attacks each combat if able, and if Alpine Guide leaves the battlefield, you sacrifice a mountain. So he's like a suicidal mountaineer that will, he gives you a land, but he'll just as quickly make you lose a land if you should die, because he will continue to attack. I think a fine card overall, and at minimum you'll have that one turn where you have, like you go from 3 mana to 5 mana, and maybe that's enough mana to help you kill something and make sure Alpine Guide stays around and you get to be ahead, or you just use that one turn where you have a 5th land to play your 5-drop, and then Alpine Guide dies, and hopefully traded for an opponent's creature. I think Alpine Guide's pretty decent. Aria of Flame, 3 mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, oh yeah, each opponent gains 10 life. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a verse counter on Aria of Flame. Then it deals damage equal to the number of verse counters on it to target player or planeswalker. Yeah, that's that's unlikely to see play in Constructed. And also probably not good enough for, well, probably not good enough for Limited either. You need so many instants and sorceries. And it can only, if it go to creatures, this card would be off the chain insane, gaga crazy good in Limited. The fact that it can only target players or planeswalkers means it's pretty bad for Limited. And I don't think it's going to be good enough for Constructed. It's just too much mana and too slow to do anything in Constructed. Neat card though. Bladeback Sliver. 1 and a red for 2/2 with Hellbent. As long as you have no cards in hand, Sliver creatures you control have tap. This creature deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. So you turn all your slivers into things that can ping your opponent's face. There hasn't been a single sliver that enhances power and toughness so far. We've seen Unearth, this weird pinging effect. We've seen First Strike. I don't think there's been a single one that enhances power and toughness, but that's what green slivers are for. Bogarden, Dragonheart. 3 mana, 2/2. Sacrifice another creature until end of turn. Bogarden, Dragonheart becomes a dragon with base power and toughness, 4/4 flying and haste. So, if you have that bunch of goblin tokens out, you can temporarily make this guy into a 4/4 flying haste. It's a fine card. Sacrificing a creature is not free. But yeah, fairly medium. It's slightly better than a 3 mana 2/2, but much worse than a 4/4 flying haste, and it's trying to balance out what spot that would be. And also differs depending on the makeup of the deck that you've drafted, and also the rest of the card file as to how many tokens there are. Hey, Cleaving Silver, finally a sliver that enhances other slivers' power and toughness. 4 mana 2/2 sliver that says sliver creatures you control get +2/+0, so it's essentially a 4 mana 4/2 because it'll always count itself by that static ability. Firebolt, so a reasonable card. Not like great. 4 mana 4/2s aren't exactly awesome. If you have a crazy dumb amount of changelings and stuff, maybe it gets even better. But I don't know if red will have that many changelings, we'll see. Firebolt, single red, deals 2 damage to any target. It's a sorcery, and you can flash it back for 5 mana. I'm pretty sure that's a reprint and a fine card. see what the toughness of creatures is. It seems like there is pretty small creatures in the set. Lots of smaller toughness. Fists of Flame. 1 in a red. Instant. Draw a card until end of turn. Target creature gains trample and gets +1/+0 until for each card you've drawn this turn. So in many cases will be you'll draw a card and give a creature 2 additional power and trample if you cast it on your own turn. And if you cast it on your opponent's turn, you'll probably just give your creature 1 additional power. That's a pretty neat card. Doesn't help your creatures survive a removal spell or really survive combat, but it does help them kill stuff and replace itself with a card draw, so that's okay. Here's the red force card. 1 red. If it's not your turn, you may exile a red card, yada yada yada, from your hand. Instant, create 2 3/1 red creature elemental tokens with trample and haste, and you sacrifice those tokens at the beginning of your next upkeep. That's neat. The fact that it's that you can cast it for free if it's not your turn means you could have some pretty explosive, like devastating summons kind of effects. This card might see a fair amount of play in sort of all-in red decks that are trying to kill you on like turn 2 or 3 with some crazy, crazy stuff. And this card's gonna be scary. And I think of the forces we've seen so far, I think this one has the highest chance of being a main deck card. Obviously, it doesn't have much utility out of the sideboard. Geomancer's Gambit. It could even maybe see play. No. I was thinking it might even see play in like traditional burn. Maybe. It might. This might be a really big deal, this Force of Rage. Geomancer's Gambit. 2 in a red for a sorcery, destroy target land. So controller may search the library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle their library, and then you draw a card. I guess the gambit is that they won't have basic lands in their deck. And it's sort of a fun little stone rain. But the fact that you get to draw a card is nice. Goat Nap. They could have called it Kidnap because goat babies are called kids, and that would have been very funny. 2 in a red sorcery, gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap that creature, gains haste, yada yada. If that creature is a goat, it also gains 3 additional power. So it's just like sorcery speed active treason, but it is important to note that there's a common active treason type effect that goes well with the sacrifice mechanics we've seen in red and black, so that'll definitely be an archetype potentially. Goblin Champion, single red for 0/1 with haste and exalted. That's kind of neat. I think this is actually more playable than you might expect. At minimum, it'll attack as a 1/1, and later on in the game, when the like 0/1 body is no longer relevant, he'll stick around and enhance the power and toughness of any of your 1 other creature's attacks. I think this card will be played more than you might expect, more than I might expect. Goblin Engineer, 1 in a red for 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for an artifact, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library, and for red, tap, sacrifice an artifact, you return target artifact card with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's kind of neat. It has the potential to do some broken stuff if it's important for you to have a artifact card into your graveyard of some type. Goblin Engineer has some potential to do some powerful stuff. I don't know what that stuff is. It would require doing a lot of research, but I think Goblin Engineer is interesting and powerful. Goblin Matron, 2 in a red for 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Goblin card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. There might be enough support for Goblin Tribal aggressive decks in Modern, with cards like Goblin Matron coming up. We shall see. Goblin Oriflamme, or Oriflame. Like Flame? Hard to say. 1 in red, enchantment, attacking creatures you control will get additional power. Pretty dull. Looks like there is some token stuff going on in red here, though. Goblin War Party, 4 mana for sorcery, create 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, or creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn, and if you pay 7 mana for the Entwine, you get both. You create 3 red goblin creature tokens, and then they all gain +1/+1 and haste until end of turn. It's kind of like 7 mana, build your own heroic reinforcements, except it's 3 creatures instead of 2. Could be really sweet. Let's see. 4 mana to create 3 1/1 red creature token is probably the most interesting part of that. Hollowhead Sliver. Oh, I like this one. 3 mana for a 2/2 Sliver, and it says all the Sliver creatures you control have tap, discard a card, draw a card. It gives them the Rummage ability. That's pretty neat. Igneous Elemental. 6 mana for 4/3. This spell costs 2 less to cast if there's a land card in your graveyard. So, basically, if you have some sort of fetch land or land has been destroyed or you discarded a land to some rummaging effect. When this 4/3 enters the battlefield, you may have it deal 2 damage to target creature. Alright. If there's a reliable way to get land cards into your graveyard, this will be a very good card. And even without, it's a fine card. Here's a way to get land cards into your graveyard. Leva Dart. Deal 1 damage to any target, and you can flash it back by sacrificing a mountain. I don't think this will see much play in Limited, unless there's a whole lot of reasons to deal 1 damage to stuff. Sacrificing a mountain is a heavy cost to pay, and that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to pay a mountain and a red to deal 2 damage to any target, which is, like, compare that to, like, Shock. But in Modern, there's a lot of potential for this to be in the Phoenix decks, which I'm somewhat of an aficionado of. Magmatic Sinkhole, 6 mana, instant Delve. It deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and Delve is a pretty powerful mechanic that says you can exile cards from your graveyard to reduce the colorless cast of Magmatic Sinkhole. I think this is going to be one of the better red commons, so long as you can delve at a reasonable amount. I mustn't overemphasize how good Delve is in Limited after having seen it in Constructed and decks that are built around delving, so maybe it's not going to be super crazy good, but I think it'll be decent. Orcish Hellraiser, 1 and a red for a 3/2 with Echo red. Echo says at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to, the next turn you have to pay the Echo cost. It's sort of like forestalls, it's like a payment plan. You have to pay the Echo cost of the next turn, and if you don't pay the Echo cost, you sacrifice it. And it says when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to target player or planeswalker. I think this will be pretty reasonable and Limited. You may want it to die. You can have like a suspend 1 shock, or you may want it to stick around and be a 3/2 creature for 2 mana, although you do have to pay an additional mana for them. Alright. Or Scale Guardian. 7 mana, I'm guessing Convoke? No. 7 mana, 4/4. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each land card in your graveyard. It's the second card that's identified land cards. And then we also have Delve. I guess there's a bit of a rummaging theme, a sacrifice lands theme going on. It's but otherwise it's 7 mana Flying Haste. Well, we'll have to see how many land cards we can get into our graveyards here. Pashalik Mons, 3 mana for a 2/2 Goblin Warrior. Whenever it or another goblin creature you control dies, this creature deals 1 damage to any target, and for 4 mana you can sacrifice a goblin to create 2 red goblin creature tokens. That's kind of neat. He sort of like, he like produces more goblins, and so for 4 mana, you deal 1 damage to any target and make one, like, end up with 1 more goblin than you started with. That's pretty cool. Pillage, 3 mana, destroy target artifact or land. It can't be regenerated. Alright, it's basically Demolish, a 3 mana Demolish with more flavor text on it. This can't be regenerated nonsense. Don't expect it to play that much in the Limited format, unless there's a lot of people using that white removal spell that enchants Snow Permanent. Planebound Accomplice, 3 mana for 1/3 for red. You may put a Planeswalker card from your hand onto the battlefield, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. It's kind of like having Sneak Attack, but for Planeswalkers. And in the background there is the new Planeswalker that was revealed in this set. Probably completely irrelevant and Limited, and maybe interesting in Constructed, but probably not. We'll see. Pyrophobia, 1 and a red, sorcery, deals 3 damage to target creature. Cowards can't block this turn. Bit of a meme that there's a creature type Cowards that can't block warriors. It's often referred to in Magic, but more interesting for the deals 3 damage to target creature. I don't know if I've seen a Coward yet, except for the white enchantment that turn a creature into a Coward. I think if there was going to be Cowards, they would be in red. So yeah, that might just be purely for flavor reasons. Still a very fine card. Can't go to the face, but can deal 3 damage to target creature at sorcery speed. That's more than likely going to be one of the best common red cards in the set. Quakefoot Cyclops, 5 mana for a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn. That's a pretty powerful effect that I always like. And you can cycle him for 1 in red, and if you do that, target creature can't block this turn. It's very reminiscent of the blue spell that would tap up to 4 creatures, or So I think I really like Quakefoot Cyclops. I'll probably definitely want to have 1 in every red deck I play in the format. Ravenous Giant, 4 mana 5/5. Oh, neat. At the beginning of your upkeep, Ravenous Giant deals 1 damage to you. So you get an undercosted large creature, but he'll eventually kill you. I like it. Reckless Charge, single red for sorcery. Normally, if you have a 4 mana 5/5, you'll be able to kill your opponent before this creature kills you. Reckless Charge, single red, sorcery. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gets haste until end of turn with flashback. The fact that it has flashback makes this a lot more appealing than other cards of this ilk that don't replace themselves, don't give your creature more power and toughness, are sorceries. You have to cast them, and your opponent has full information about how big the creature will be before blockers are declared. But with flashback, it gets a little bit more interesting and has a bit more utility. So I'll have to be sure to give Reckless Charge a chance. Here's a crazy card. Seasoned Pyromancer instead of what's the other one called? Young Pyromancer. So this is the Young Pyromancer all growed up, I guess. 1 red for a 2/2. When he enters the battlefield, discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. For each non-land card discarded this way, you create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. And for 5 mana, you can exile this guy from your graveyard to create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. I think there's going to be some Young Pyromancer, Seasoned Pyromancer decks out there. And he plays well with all the prowess shenanigans going on. Soulscar Mage, the 8-drop, I want to say, that has its power and toughness reduced, or sorry, its mana cost reduced for each spell in your graveyard. I think there's a deck there that Seasoned Pyromancer can slot right into. Shenanigans. 1 in red, sorcery, destroy target artifact with Dredge 1. Okay, so it's a reusable artifact, destruction, shatter at sorcery speed. Dredge says if you would draw a card, instead you may put the Dredge number, in this case 1, card from the top of your library into your graveyard, and if you do, you return Shenanigans. Instead of the draw that you would have gotten, you return Shenanigans from your graveyard to your hand as your card that you drew. I think a neat effect, and probably going to make a big splash in modern sideboards. And certainly in the Dredge sideboard. Spinehorn Minotaur. 2 in red for 2/3. And if you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, such as with some sort of rummage effect, then this guy is double strike. That's fine. It's neat that you'll draw 1 card for your draw step, and then maybe you have some instant speed cantrip, or you cycle something and draw an additional card at instant speed, and surprisingly give this guy double strike. So I think he's pretty decent. It'll be probably easier to turn on than I think. It'll be pretty hard to turn him into double strike on your opponent's turn, but he's still pretty neat. Spiteful Sliver, 3 mana, 2/2 Sliver. Sliver creatures you control have. Whenever this creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target player or planeswalker. Okay, makes it into sort of a volatile creature that when it takes any kind of damage, and since it's only 2/2, if it takes any kind of damage, it's probably lethal damage, but at least it'll kill something on its way out or deal damage to... Oh wait, it's only player or planeswalker. Ugh. Well, that makes it a lot worse. Yeah, that's a lot worse. I thought if it could hit creatures, it'd be great, but nah, not too excited by that. Although, if there's... at the end of the day, sometimes if you have a critical mass of slivers, they're going to have to start blocking your slivers, and you can't take too many... and if you have your slivers of Unearth, then oh boy. Then they're taking a lot of damage. Tectonic Reformation. 1 red. Each land card in your hand has cycling red. Oh yeah, that's another reason that cycling, getting land cards in your graveyard is there's the set of cycle lands. Forgot about that until this very moment. Tectonic Reformation, 1 in red. Enchantment, each land card in your hand has cycling for a red, and you can cycle this own card. Tectonic Reformation will be like a limited bomb. Might be powerful in constructed. Again, I'm a novice when it comes to cycling and all the things you can do with cycling, but I'm sure other people will figure that out. Throes of Chaos, 3 in red for a sorcery with Cascade. Oh man, so it just does nothing. So you cast this for 4 mana, nothing happens on the card itself, but before it resolves, it has this trigger where it cascades. You reveal cards from the top of your library until you hit a card, a non-land card that costs less than 4 mana, so 3 or less, and then you finish casting that card. So it's like a very random card. You can spend 4 mana to cast a random card from the top of your library, somewhere from the top of your library that costs less mana than 4. But the added benefit is it has Retrace, so you can cast this card from your graveyard as many times as you want, as long as you discard a land while you do it. So you can spend 4 mana again and discard a land from your hand to do it again. It's kind of neat. More like reasons to have, or more ways for lands to go to your graveyard. Kind of a neat card. Probably not good enough for high selection and limited, or for play in modern, but a fun card all the same. Versus Rage, 2 in a red for instant, which cannot be countered, which deals 3 damage to any target, and if instead you pay, so that'd be 3 plus 9, 12 total mana, it's an uncounterable 10 damage to the permanent or player, which can't be prevented either. I think it's just, almost all the time it's going to be a 3 mana, deal 3, that can't be countered, which is just fine. Not great for constructed, but probably one of the better uncommons for limited. Vengeful Devil, 1 in red for a 1/1 with haste, which has Morbid. So if a creature, Morbid activates if a creature has died this turn. Vengeful Devil deals 1 damage to any target. Activate this only if a creature died this turn. Okay, fun. It's sort of like Fanatical Firebrand with the potential to reuse its ping ability, but only if other creatures are dying. Fiashino, Sand Sprinter, 3 mana for a 4/1 with Trample Haste. At the beginning of end step, return it to its owner's hand. Oh, that's pretty cool. Cycling for red. So you could, like, as long as it's not blocked, you can attack. It comes back to your hand. I like that card. And it has cycling 1. If it's not going to be able to attack and you don't really want it anymore, you could just always cycle it away. I think that's a pretty good card. Volatile Claws, 2 in a red, instant until end of turn. Creatures you control get +2/+0 and gain all creature types. A lot of these Trumpet Blast types of effects are usually pretty bad. This one is probably no exception, unless there's crazy amounts of creature type matters stuff going on, but we'll see. Ayula, Queen Among Bears. And very appropriate that it is a prototypical bear, a 2 mana 2/2 creature. Whenever another bear enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on said bear, or that bear fights target creature you don't control. Well, another upside of having changelings is pretty neat. Like Ayula, just like a reasonable 2-drop creature that when you play any changeling after that, you can now just put 2 counters on it or have it fight a smaller creature. I think Ayula is going to be pretty good. Again, incentivizes you for having changelings. I'm not expecting there to be that many other strictly bear creatures, but again, all these changelings count as bears because they count as all creature types. Pretty neat. Ayula's Influence. Well, there's a bear. Green, enchantment rare. Discard a land card, create a 2/2 green bear creature token. Well, beautiful pairing. You go turn 2 Ayula, turn 3 Ayula's Influence, discard a land card, make a 4/4, and you're off to the races. Ayula's Influence and Life from the Loam could do some fun stuff. A card that used to be used with Life from the Loam was Seismic Assault. Let's see if we can find that. Actually, the very first modern Grand Prix was won by a Life from the Loam Seismic Assault deck. And so, but you have to decide which is better. Well, the fact that Life from the Loam itself is already green mana, and that other card is green mana, and making a 2/2 might be better in many circumstances than shocking someone for 2, so maybe there's a new return of Life from the Loam crazy decks. Bellowing Elk. In limited, probably just fine. Constructed, like I said, could be more interesting, but I think it'll be playable and limited. It won't be insane or anything. And not a very good turn 3 play, but it's great to have it in play when you're on like turn 10 and you're just top decking lands. Also not a good top deck when you're already at that state unless you've held on to some lands to potentially discard. Bellowing Elk, 4 mana, 4/2. As long as you had another creature enter the battlefield under control this turn, this guy has trample and indestructible. Wow, that's pretty good for a 4 mana card. And often in limited, you will be playing lots of creatures, so that's pretty neat. Hard to pull it off on your own turn, but there is that that white instant that can do it. Oh, Collector Oof, or Oof, I think that's how you pronounce that. 1 in green for 2/2. Activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. It's Stony Silence on a stick. That's crazy. That is crazy. Another guy to add to the green, like, tutor package hate cards. I like me a Collector Oof. Since I often play those types of decks. The Eldritch Evolution, Neoform, Collected Company, Court of Calling kind of deck. I like Collector Oof, it's pretty neat. Conifer Worm, 5 mana, 4/4. For limited, probably irrelevant, just 2 mana, 2/2. The text box, at least. Conifer Worm, 5 mana, 4/4, Trample. For 4 mana, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of snow permanents you control, which will at least be 1 because Conifer Worm itself is a snow permanent. So you can spend 5 mana to give it +1/+1, and if you have like a land or 2, then it starts to be a little more interesting. But still, at the face of it, 5 mana, 4/4 Trample, just fine. Here's a crazy one. Huh. So, Crashing Footfalls doesn't have a converted mana cost, because the only way you can cast it is by suspending it, by paying a single green. And 4 turns later, you'll create 2 4/4 green Rhino creature tokens with Trample. Obviously, very, very good on turn 1. Very, very, very bad on, like, turn 8, when you're like, oh god, I have to wait 5 turns before I get these Rhinos. And weird thing with suspend, if you suspend a creature, it'll have haste. But in this case, these tokens I don't believe will have haste. Because it's a spell that's creating tokens and otherwise, yeah. So, interesting card there. The fact that it doesn't have a converted mana cost means if you have any kind of cascade effect or something like Electro Dominance or some other stuff, you can cast this for... It's as though it has a CMC of 0, so there might be some ways to cheat Crashing Footfalls into play. Weird little card. I never played a limited set with Suspend, so I don't know how good the Suspend cards were that you could not cast ordinarily. I'll have to do some research on that sort of stuff, and defer to other evaluation. Deep Forest Hermit, 5 mana for 1/1 with Vanishing 3. Vanishing says... yeah. Vanishing, like, it means it sticks around for a little bit. Each turn you remove a counter from the 3 counters that it starts with, and once the last counter is gone, you sacrifice the creature. But for 5 mana, enter the battlefield, create 4 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, and squirrels you control get +1/+1. So, no matter what, you're making 5 bodies for 5 mana, and so long as Deep Forest Hermit remains in play, which it will for 3 turns unless it gets killed, those squirrels are all bigger. It's pretty neat. Powerful effect. Maybe not good enough for constructed, certainly quite good in limited, I think, but neat overall. Elvish Fury. Instant, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn with buyback 4. Probably not gonna spend the 5 mana on that too often, but probably would have, like, on average 0.5 of these in my green decks if I had to guess. Excavating Anurid. 5 mana for 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, you draw a card. And if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, this guy gets +1/+1 and has Vigilance. Man, there's so many mechanics in this format. And the fact that you sacrifice a land when you start means you're all the much closer to getting those 7 cards. It is kind of hard to get 7 cards in your graveyard in the game of Limited, though. But, and sacrificing a land is not free, but I bet you could probably be fine to do it. Excavating Aneroid seems okay. Force of Vigor, 4 mana. It's, again, the rest of the Force cycle. Destroy up to 2 artifacts and or enchantments. And if it's not your turn, exile a green card, yada yada yada. Yeah, it's okay. It's more of a hate card. Frostwalla. It's like Rootwalla, but frosty. 2 and a green for 2/2 with snow. Frostwalla gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. And I guess you need a snow land of some kind to do that ability. But this type of effect can be good. We'll see about this one. Genesis, old school card, relevant in maybe Legacy, but probably not. More likely relevant in like EDH games. 5 mana for 4/4 at the beginning of your upkeep. If it's in your graveyard, you may take 2 and a green. If you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So like, you kind of want Genesis in your graveyard so that you can then start returning other cards from your graveyard to your hand. Probably a little too slow and weird for Modern Constructed these days, with like turn 3 or 4 kills, but an okay card all the same. Glacial, and probably very strong in Limited actually, like a bomb in Limited. Glacial Revelation, 2 and a green for sorcery. Reveal the top 6 cards of your library. You may put any number of snow permanent cards from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. There's not a lot of snow permanents that aren't lands. This card is... The rest go into the graveyard, which is kind of neat. We'll see about that one. Should be okay. Hex Drinker. This is a... this weird card is the return of levels and leveling up your creatures. This is a mechanic that was in the very first set I ever played of Magic, which is Rise of the Eldrazi. This like brings back all the nostalgias for me. I really like it. It's... So the way you read this is all these creatures start on level... I think they all start on level 0, if I remember correctly. I'd have to read the rules reminder text for level, but I believe creatures start on level 0. So it's a green 2/1, and for colorless you can put a level counter on it. And so once you've gotten 3, so once you've invested 3 more colorless mana, it then becomes 4/4 with protection from instants. So for 4 total mana investment across however many turns you want, although you can only level up as a sorcery, it becomes a 4 mana, or a 4/4 with protection from instants. And then if you pour 5 more mana into it, you can give it protection from everything and make it a 6/6. I don't know if it's good enough to really make the cut in any constructed decks, but it's a neat, very neat card, and I think pretty darn good in Limited. And obviously it hits the nostalgias for me. Crows and Tuskers, 7 mana for a 6/5 with cycling 2 and a green. Whenever you cycle this guy, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then... wait, what? You may search your library for a basic land card. So it's basically got like basic land cycling. So I guess this works well in Limited, particularly in Sealed. Like, if it's in the late game, great, you've got a 7 mana 6/5, a giant creature, awesome. And if it's in the earlier game, you get to cycle it, both draw a card and put a basic land card in your hand. So you get like 2 cards for the 3 mana that you spent, and you do that before you draw. I like Crows and Tusker. Not great, probably have like an average of 1 of those in my green Limited decks, but in Modern Horizons, but still fine. Llanowar Tribe, green, green, green for a 3/3 that itself can then tap to add green, green, green. This card's probably really, really good in Limited. I don't think it's going to be that exciting in Modern, but Constructed, but still pretty sweet in Limited. Mother Bear, that's another bear. Those little cubbies. 1 in green for 2/2. And it has, I guess, a pretty normal, aside from this text. 5 mana, exile it from your graveyard to create 2 green green bear creature tokens. Activate this ability only anytime you cast a sorcery. Oh, that's flavorful and evocative and sad. She's presumably died, but she still creates babies that she's sort of protecting, kind of, but yeah. Mother Bear's neat. I don't know how good it is in limited, but certainly a neat card. Excellently designed. Marasa Behemoth. 6 mana for 5/5 trample, and it gets +3/+3 as long as there's a land card in your graveyard, which, now that I realize there's the land cycling cards, should be easier than I think. So this card's going to be pretty good. Nantuko Cultivator. 4 mana for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard any number of land cards, put that many +1/+1 counters on Nantuko Cultivator, and draw that many cards. Wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. It replaces all the cards it drew, and you may end up, like, even if you need lands, you may still end up with the same number of lands or some amount of lands that you discarded, and you get to draw cards. I like Nantuko Cultivator quite a bit. Here's Nimble Mongoose. Where's his face? How can I figure this out? Oh, there. This ear kind of looks like a mouth, but there's an eye. Hey, JB Raid Phoenix. Well, have yourself a good rest of your day, and yeah, maybe we'll run into each other at some point. Nimble Mongoose reprint. 1/1 with Shroud for green. And if you get your graveyard up to 7 or more cards, just like that other one, it becomes a 3/3 with Shroud. Shroud is like hexproof, except neither party can target it with spells or abilities. Hexproof, only your opponent can't target your guy. Regrowth. Return target card from a graveyard to your land. Not very exciting. Rhyme Tender. 1 and a green for 2/2 that has tap, untap another target snow permanent. So I guess this is the like mana accelerant green creature of the format. You need a snow land to be able to untap things. Saddled Rhyme Stag. 1 and a green. So I think Rhyme Tender is okay. Again, it all depends on how many snow permanents you can get, which probably isn't that many. Saddled Rhyme Stag, 1 and a green. I'd be so cool to ride a giant elk, making those crazy elk shrieking noise that they make the whole time. 1 and a green for 2/2. It gets +2/+2 as long as you had another creature enter the battlefield under your control this turn. Okay. So you play it as a 2/2 on turn 2, and then the next turn you play your creature first main phase, and then you attack with a 4/4, etc., etc. That seems pretty strong. Savage Swipe. It makes your combat tricks better and makes your opponent's combat tricks... makes your combat tricks worse and your opponent's combat tricks better, because you're doing a lot of tapping out pre-main phase, or first main phase, but still fine. Savage Swipe. Green. Sorcery. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn if its power is 2. Then it fights target creature you don't control. So it's like a very narrow... Well, it's a narrow prey upon. It still has the text of target creature fights target... Your creature fights target creature you don't control, and only if its power started off at being 2 will it gain an additional +2/+2. But still a very fine card. Prey upon can be good in many formats. We'll see how good it is in this limited format. I have a hunch there's going to be a lot of 2-power creatures in green. I wonder where I'm getting that impression from. It's possibly these 2 cards in a row here that were 2-power. Scale Up. Green. Sorcery. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a green worm with power and base power and toughness 6/4. So for a sorcery speed like combat trick, pretty powerful in Modern Infect though. It's basically +5 power for a single green. But for 6 mana, you can cast the spell and Overload, making all your creatures become green worm creatures with power and toughness 6/4 till end of turn. Again, all its sorcery speed. But Scale Up is an interesting one for Modern Infect. Spore Frog, green for a 1/1. Sacrifice Spore Frog, prevent all combat damage to be dealt this turn. So he's basically Root Snare on a stick, and or Fog on a stick, I guess, is the more accurate representation, and might have some weird potential in some green creature recursion deck that will prevent combat damage from ever occurring. We shall see. Spring Bloom Druid. 2 and a green for a 1/1. When he enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tab, shuffle your library. This card is going to be one of the best cards, one of the best green commons in this limited format. There's lots of cards that care about you having lands in your graveyards. There's things like Threshold and Delve, And you get to immediately replace your land and fix your mana. I think Spring Bloom Druid is going to be like a very high pick for green in limited. And I like this card a lot. It helps fix you. It helps accelerate you. It puts a land in your graveyard for those mechanics. Love it. Tempered Sliver. 2 and a green for 2/2 Sliver. Which Sliver creatures you control have whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. I was really depending on green to have the sliver that would enhance the power and toughness, or at least the toughness of slivers. It's not fulfilling that requirement here. This does mean any of your slivers that do manage to connect will start to grow. But, we'll see about Tempered Sliver. With all the... You have to be careful with all the changelings and the slivers. There's going to be some crazy stuff going on in this set. Tornado. Is that like a bear-eagle hybrid? My goodness. Or is that... No, it's just a... Well, yeah, it's kind of like what that is. I guess it could be argued that it's just a very husky griffin. Maybe that's the... that's the flavor. So it's 2 and a green to store target creature with flying, so basically plummet, but it has cycling for 1 and green. That's the perfect sideboard card. Like, bring in your plummet, and if you're in a situation where you're behind, or your opponent's killing you with a creature that's not a flyer, or you don't have a target for it, but you need something, you just cycle this away and get something else. I love Tornado for limited. Treefolk Umbra, 2 and a green, enchanted creature. Enchanted creature gets 2 toughness, and rather than assigning combat damage equal to its power, it assigns combat damage equal to its toughness. That's kind of cool. And it has Totem Armor, which is another mechanic from, I want to say Rise of the Drowsy, maybe? But basically, if the creature would be destroyed, instead you remove that aura from it, and the creature lives. I think Treefolk Umbra is pretty neat. Plays with that white card that wanted you to have a second aura attached. But there are like effects that give creatures negative power and toughness, which circumvents the destroyed aspect of things. Treetop Ambusher, 1 and a green. Oh, dash. Forgot about dash. 1 and a green for 2/1. Whenever it attacks, target creature control gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And dash says, I think, yeah, you can play this spell for its dash cost, gains haste, but it's returned to the battlefield at the end of turn, basically. Yeah, Treetop Ambusher's not great. It's interesting and fine, but not exciting. Trumpeting Herd, 4 mana for sorcery. Create a 3/3 green elephant creature token with rebound. Ooh, I like this. I like this a lot. So you create a 3/3 on your own turn, and then at the beginning of your next upkeep, you create another 3/3, all for the low price of a single green mana. Yeah, it's great. Twin Silk Spider, 3 mana for a 1/2 with reach, and when it enters the battlefield, it creates a copy of itself, thus the twin part, I suppose. So you end up for 3 mana, you end up with basically 2 power and 4 toughness worth of reach creatures. Huh, cool. Not like super crazy insane, but still it's 2 bodies for 1 card, and 2 power and 4 toughness across 2 bodies. I like Twin Silk Spider. It plays well with all kinds of stuff. Unbound Flourishing, 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a permanent spell with a mana cost that contains X, double the value of X. When you cast an instant or sorcery with that same X as part of it, or activate ability with X, copy that spell or ability. You may choose new copies. Well, probably not too useful in limited. Probably not too useful in competitive Modern Constructed. Might be some fun, certainly fun in like EDH and all those sort of formats. But like Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista immediately come to mind. But you've had to spend 3 mana and your turn presumably casting this first. I'm not too excited about Unbound Flourishing, but it's neat all the same. Wall of Blossoms, classic. 1 and a green for an 0/4 defender. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. It's a nice little thing that you can play on turn 2. Helps you with Convoke, kind of cycles. Got a body, it's got a creature. You can sacrifice it to devour. Wall of Blossoms will be a card that'll go in a lot of green decks, I think. Weather the Storm. 1 and a green. Instant. You gain 3 life, and it has Storm. Another of the weird versions of green life gain cards. I kind of like it. Pretty damn good against Grape Shot, that's for sure. Grape Shot is Storm, deal 1 damage to target player. This is Weather Storm, gain 3 life with Storm. Yeah, you'll... another nice counter to Storm for green decks. Web Weaver Changeling. 5 mana for 3/5. Uncommon. Changeling with Reach. When it enters the battlefield, if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you gain 5 life. Alright. It's just like a Mammoth Spider with a additional weirdo text that you could sometimes gain life, and also it's a Changeling, which matters for bear synergy and other stuff. I really like Web Weaver Changeling. Winding Way. 1 and a green. Choose creature or land. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all cards of the chosen type revealed this way into your hand and the rest of your graveyard. This actually could be pretty good. This could be pretty good in limited too. Yeah, I like Winding Way a fair amount. It's different from, it's like modular and different from some of the other modular cards of this type where you get to like look at the top X and like take a creature or land. This one you have to know ahead of time. And so early in the game, if you're mana screwed, you name land. Later in the game, when you're mana flooded or you don't no longer need lands, you name creature. Maybe somewhere in the mid game, you name creature and sometimes land. I really like Winding Way, and the fact that it puts the rest on the graveyard is also really neat. Helps with threshold and land cards in your graveyard stuff and things like that. I like Winding Way. Multicolored. How far? We better be... Oh, there's about 60 cards left. We can do it. Abominable Treefolk. 4 mana for a star. It's a snow creature. It's trample. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of snow permanents you control, which will at minimum be 1 because Treefolk is a snow permanent. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its next untap step. This is an uncommon. So it is a 1-turn sort of icy thing, and you've got at minimum a 1/1 for 4. Well, actually the gold uncommons should give us somewhat of a clue as to what the color pair mechanics will be. That's pretty neat. Here's a cool one. Cloud Shredder Sliver. 1 in red for a 1/1. Sliver creatures you control have flying and haste. That's pretty powerful. That is quite powerful. Might even, there was one, I think one guy top 8'd like SCG Open in Modern with slivers out of like nowhere, and everyone's like, what in the heck? And it hasn't been seen before or since. But with enough sliver stuff, maybe there'll be a sliver deck all of a sudden. Collected Conjuring. Oh, this is Collected Company, but for spells. 4 mana. Exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast up to 2 sorcery cards with CMC 3 or less from among them without paying their costs. Put the exiled cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Significantly worse than Collected Company. A, because it's sorcery, not instant. B, it's 2 colors. C, you have to play... Collected Company wants you to play a lot of creatures. This wants you to play a lot of sorceries. Yeah, Collected Conjuring, and I think Frank Carson did the math of like how many sorceries you'd have to play to have the expectation of playing 2 sorceries. So this card is basically terrible and unplayable in every format, but it's neat. I'll give it the neat effect. Eladamri's Call. Eladamri's Call. Green and white for an instant. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. Alright. Just dig up for a creature. This might see play in Constructed. I don't know if this sort of effect has been missing. The fact that you can just dig up any creature is pretty cool. I kind of like Eladamri's Call in Constructed. Limited, probably okay, so long as you have like a powerful bomb creature that's worth digging up. Yeah, Eladamri's Call is interesting. Etchings, if I had to guess, the black and white, it would be sort of like a token sacrifice thing. 1 white black, enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1. Mana, colorless mana, sacrifice a creature of the chosen type. Target creature you control gains indestructible till end of turn. So it's a, you name your vampire or your cat or whatever, all those creatures are bigger, and then at any point you can make one of them indestructible by sacking one. That's kind of neat. Fallen Shinobi. And like I would say a pretty good card, although it's going to be hard for you to have a unified creature type, so this will only selectively enhance some of your creatures. This Etchings of the Chosen. Fallen Shinobi, rare ninjutsu card, 5 mana for 5/4 with 4 mana ninjutsu card effect, so probably not going to be happening too much in Constructed. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana cost. He's like a super duper Thief of Sanity. Kind of. And it says play, so you can play their lands. If it said cast, it wouldn't work, but you can play the lands you exile from the top of your opponent's library. Neat. The First Sliver. Wooburg, 5 mana for 7/7 with Cascade. And it says sliver spells you cast have Cascade. So that doesn't affect itself, because that rules text won't be impactful until it's actually on the battlefield. I think. I'm pretty sure it doesn't get to Cascade twice. Yeah. So I think that's how that works. So the first time you cast, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you cast another thing. And then once it's resolved and all that's resolved, every subsequent sliver you cast will cascade. It's kind of neat. Good Fortune Unicorn, 1 green-white for 2/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on that creature. Man, pretty sweet. And not too hard of a hoop to jump through. It's not like Satyr Enchanter who wanted you to play a bunch of auras or something. It's just play a bunch of creatures in green and white. What else are you going to be doing? Awesome. Hogak, Arisen Necropolis. This is a hybrid card. 7 mana, 5 colors, and green-black hybrid. Oh yeah, it's an 8/8, and you can't spend mana to cast this spell. It has Convoke and Delve, so you have to tap at minimum. In order to cast the spell at all, you have to tap 2 green or black cards, green or black creatures, and then you can cast it by delving or tapping subsequent creatures. Pretty hard to make this guy work, but the fact that you can, even if they kill him, you can cast him again from your graveyard, and he's a trample, could be interesting. But you can at no point spend mana to cast the spell, so pretty costly to get this guy into play. But pretty neat. I don't think it'll be playable in Constructed, but pretty neat in Limited, I think. Ice Fang Quaddle. Green and blue for 1/1. Flash, flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. It has Death Touch as long as you control 3 other snow permanents. Well, flash, flying, and ETB draw a card is pretty good, and since you can choose to put Snowlands into play, I think this card will actually maybe see Constructed play. Maybe. Depends if there's a sort of green-blue tempo-y kind of deck, but pretty cool card. Ingenious Infiltrator. 4 mana for 2/3 ninjutsu for blue and a black. That's actually the cheapest ninjutsu so far. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So yeah, you'll attack on. You'll play like a random 2-drop. Next turn you'll attack. Maybe your opponent won't block. You'll ninjutsu this guy out. We're switching the 2, and you'll get to draw your card. That's pretty cool. Certainly, ninja stuff is the name of the game. Here's Kaya's Guide. Guile, sorry, Kaya's Guile. That's Kaya there, the ghost assassin. She's both a ghost and an assassin who has killed ghosts. And real people, I guess. 1 green-white for an instant. Choose 2. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. Exile all cards from each opponent's graveyard. Create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature with flying, or you gain 4 life. And if you spend a 6 total mana instead of just 3, you can entwine to do all of the 4 things. Oh, I don't know if I've seen an entwine card with 4 options. That's pretty cool. So like, make your opponent sacrifice a creature and you make a 1/1, or like make your opponent sacrifice a creature and then exile all the graveyard. Yeah, all kinds of. This is pretty neat. Kaya's Guile. It'll probably see play. Oh, there's like a 1 of at least. And all these sort of weird Orzhov mid-range decks that exist in Modern that have never been particularly strong, but maybe Kaya's Guile will tip them over the edge of competitive awesomeness. Kess, Dissident Mage. 4 mana for 3/4, flying. During each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card cast this way would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Neat. So it's sort of a little boon for Grixis players. You get to basically You have to pay the mana cost of the card you cast from your graveyard. And you can only do it on your turn. But it's cool. It doesn't have an end of the battlefield trigger, so it does nothing if you don't get to untap with it. But might be decent. I don't have too high of hopes just because of the color restrictions. They have to play Grixis mana and it doesn't have an ETB effect, and it's 4 mana, but still a neat card all the same. Pretty broken in limited though. This will be a bomb rare limited, as long as you can get the cost. We'll have to see what kind of mana fixing there is once we get to the lands and artifacts and so on. There wasn't much in green in terms of mana fixing. Alright, what's this guy? Lava Belly Sliver. 1 red-white for 2/2. Sliver creatures you control have when this creature enters the battlefield, deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker, and you gain 1 life. None of these pings are going to creatures. They're only going to planeswalkers. Alright. Not thrilling. Both of the red-white multicolored cards in the set so far have been Sliver themed, so seems like that'll be the name of the game for the archetype in limited. Yeah, we'll see. Lightning Skelemental. What a terrifying, horrific animal that is. It's black, red, red for a 6/1. Trample Haste. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards 2 cards. And at the beginning of each end step, sacrifice Lightning Skelemental. My goodness. It's like Blightning and Ball Lightning combined. I love it. And because it has Trample and Haste, it will probably connect a lot of the time. Lightning Skelemental is terrifying. I think it's a pretty neat card, and I can actually see this seeing play in Constructed, and I think it'll be fairly decent in Limited as well. I like Lightning Skelemental a lot. Munitions Expert. Green, red and black for 1/1. I'm guessing something Goblin/Sacrificing. Flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may have it deal damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of goblins you control. There's a gooder. Wow. It's pretty neat. At minimum, it can deal 1 because it'll count itself to a creature or planeswalker. Can't go to the face, but oftentimes getting board advantage is better than just going to the dome. But yeah, I like Munitions Expert a lot. It's no surprise that I like these multicolored uncommons. They're both a higher rarity and harder to cast, so they get to put more power into them. Nature's Chant, 1 in a green-white hybrid. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. There you go. There's the naturalize of the set. Sideboard card. Reap the Past, X red green. Sorcery, return X cards at random from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Reap the Past. Ugh. No thank you. Maybe in sealed deck I'd play this as a one-of, but not too interested in this card. Like, if you can get all of the cards back from your graveyard, then maybe in the hyper late game this is a bit of a bomb. Like if you do it for X equals 5 or something for 7 total mana, and you get to redo everything that's happened in the game thus far, it could be good, but it plays pretty badly with any effect where you want to put lands into your graveyard. Yeah, I'm not too excited by Reap the Past, but there will be certain circumstances where you can make it good, I think. This card is crazy. Rot Widow Pack. 2 black-green for a 2/4 with reach, so it's a weird giant spider. It even happens to be a spider, but it has this effect. 5 mana, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach, then each opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control. Wow. You can really start grinding your opponent out. I like it. Hopefully, it's a great time for spider spawning. I guess you would play this and happily want as many of those, as many of the 3 mana guy that makes 2 spiders. Ruination Rioter, red-green for 2/2. When it dies, you may have it deal damage to any target equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. Well, there's certainly a get lands in your graveyard thing going on. There's the Planeswalker, almost there. Soul Herder, 1 white-blue for a 1/1. Spirit. Whenever a creature is exiled from the battlefield, put a counter on Soul Herder. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile another target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So this is like you get to keep blinking your stuff, and whenever you blink something, you'll then make Soul Herder all the much more larger. Well, there was plenty of cards that said blink things in blue and white, and I guess that's sort of the theme of this thing. This guy does not fly. That's a mistake I'll probably make, and others will during the format, but yeah. Let me guess. Red, blue. Spells matter. 3 red-blue for 3/4 flying. Whenever it attacks, deals damage equal to any target equal to the number of cards you draw on this turn. No, it's drawing cards matters. I like it. Any target. I like Thundering Djinn a lot. This card's gonna be broken good. There's a card that was recently revealed. Unsettled Mariner. White, blue for a 2/2 changeling. Whenever you or permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1. This card could easily just be slotted right into Modern Humans right now. It can be slotted in a whole heap of decks as long as you're willing to expend blue and white mana on it, and it just makes every one of your permanents that much safer because it makes things cost more. I like Unsettled Mariner quite a bit. The issue with humans at this point is there's so many good humans already that in order to play Unsettled Mariner, you have to kick something else out, and so what would you kick out to make room for Mariner? That is the question. Ren and 6. Here's a 2-mana Planeswalker. And you wanted lands in your graveyard? Well, this is the guy for it. Red-green, 3 mana, +1. Return up to 1 target land card from your graveyard to your hand. Works well if you've had a fetch land previous to that. -1, deals 1 damage to any target. -7, you get an emblem with instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard have retrace, aka you get to pay them for the original mana cost while discarding a land. And since his +1 lets you find lands, you should be able to do that no problem. It doesn't do a whole lot, but again, it is a 2-mana Planeswalker, so it can't really do too much. But it's neat all the same. And you can, the dealing 1 to any target means you could like pick off a Thalia or a Mana Dork as long as you've been able to resolve this. I like Ren and 6. I think it'll be fine in Limited. It's cheap enough and can ping stuff, so I think it'll be playable in Limited. Maybe not like a crazy bomb. It is going to be hard to cast exactly on turn 2, and it does commit you to 2 colors, but I think I like Ren and 6. There's only 2 Planeswalkers in the set, this and Serra, so pretty neat. Morophon the Boundless. This is the only... Oh, we're into colorless. Shouldn't this should have a collector number of 1, yeah. Morophon the Boundless, 7 mana for 6/6 Changeling. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Spells of the chosen type you cast cost a Wooburg less to cast. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana you pay. Okay. Other creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Wow, this card is very powerful in Limited, as long as you can resolve it for its 7 mana cost. But once it's in play, all your spells are cheaper. Although it only works in creatures, because you choose a creature type at the beginning. Unless you have like fairy spells or something. Fairy instants and sorceries. But, and then it makes them all bigger too. Morophon, pretty powerful. Probably not good enough for constructed unless you can cheat it into play. Get it from your graveyard or from your library into play through some means. Here we are into the artifacts. Still got a lot of stuff left. We gotta go through the lands too. Altar of Dementia, 2 mana artifact. Sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of the library into their graveyard. The fact that you don't have to pay any additional mana means there's some stuff going on there maybe, but and limited decks are only 40 cards, so this sort of like weird MILF effect is a little bit more powerful, but I'm not super excited by Altar of Dementia. Amorphous Axe, 2. Cool. It's a 2 mana, 3 to equip. So those sorts of stats mean it's probably not going to see a lot of play. It gives the creature +3/+0, no additional toughness, and it turns it into every creature type. I think obviously changing the creature type would have to be very, very important for this Amorphous Axe to be good at all. I'm not too keen. Oh, here's Arkham's Astrolabe, which requires snow mana to be paid, and it can only be played with snow mana. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then you can filter a mana through it to add 1 mana of any color. It's kind of cool. Birthing Boughs. 3 mana artifact, 4 tap. Create a 2/2 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. Alright, so it'll for 4 mana, and once a turn you can create a 2/2 Changeling. It's okay. Probably more a sealed deck card than a draft card. We'll see. Farmstead Gleaner, 3 mana for a 2/2. Oh, it's this thing again. It's the untap symbol. Farmstead Gleaner doesn't untap during your untap step. So you play him, it'll be a 3 mana 2/2. You have to attack with him or find some way to tap him. And then for 2 mana and untapping him, you can put a counter on him. So I guess what you could do is you could attack, and then after attacker's declared or whatever, you can then, still in combat, pay 2 and untap to put a counter on him. Farmstead Gleaner is a weird thing. You cannot... You do have to wait for Summoning Sickness to use the untap effect, if for whatever reason. Someone cheated me in a modern PTQ many years ago because they didn't realize they had to wait for Summoning Sickness on such things. Fountain of Ichor. 3 mana artifact. Tap. Add 1 mana of any color. Alright, here's your generic mana fixer of the set. 3. Fountain of Ichor becomes a 3/3 dinosaur artifact creature until end of turn. That's pretty neat. I like Fountain of Ichor. Another snow permanent. Eyesight Golem Snow. It's a 2/2. Okay. Probably not very good, ever, in anywhere, but hey, it's neat. Lesser Masticore. 2 mana 2/2. Additional cast to cost the spell. Discard a card. Okay, this is like... This is harkening back to some older powerful cards. You can't cast this with an empty hand. You have to discard a card. It has an activated ability for Lesser Masticore, deals 1 damage to target creature, and it has Persist. If it dies, it'll come back as a it'll come back as the same creature with a -1/-1 counter on it. So in order for this to really be playable, you'd really need to benefit from discarding cards. And I haven't really seen any madness or anything like that. The only thing I've seen that cares about discarding cards is getting land cards into your graveyard in red and green. I don't think Lesser Masticore will be a very high pick. We shall see. Here's the new Mox. Mox Tantalite. It has Suspend 3. For 0. It's kind of like Lotus Bloom. You have to wait 3 turns, that'll come into play, and they'll have a permanent effect that can tap to add 1 mana of any color. You can cheat that with things like Electrodominance or Cascade and stuff like that, but yeah, we'll see about Mox Tantalite. Hopefully Wizards hasn't made the mistake of printing an overpowered Mox without realizing. Scrapyard Recombiner, 3 mana for 0/0 with modular 2, so it's 3 mana for a 2/2 creature. Tap, sacrifice an artifact, search your library for a construct card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. There are some impactful constructs like Arcbound Ravager. I think Walking Ballista might be a construct. It's a neatish card, Scrapyard Recombiner. And the modular 2 means that if this dies, you get to put those 2 counters on a different target artifact creature. Sword of Sinew and Steel. This is the continuing the cycle of swords, these very powerful artifact equipment. This one says it's 3 mana to play and 2 mana to equip, just like every other sword. It says equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection for black and red, which is a pretty powerful pair of colors to be protected from. That eliminates a lot of removal spells in Modern. And that's probably why its triggered ability isn't super exciting. Whenever equipped creature just deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target planeswalker and up to 1 target artifact. So, very plausible that your opponent has neither of those types in play, but just virtue of the fact that it gives the equipped creature protection from black and red, I think is why this one is in particular so powerful. It'll be... Actually, it won't be... It'll be okay, I think, in Limited. Unless, of course, you're up against a red or black deck, in which case it gets much, much better. And probably irrelevant in competitive Modern Constructed, but I think the EDH and so on players of the world enjoy these cards. Let's look at Sword of Truth and Justice. 3 mana. This one's protection from white and blue. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and then you proliferate. That one is pretty darn good in Constructed, because even in a situation where your opponent doesn't have white or blue creatures, at least you're putting 2 counters on some random creature. I like Sword of Truth and Justice for Limited. Again, not interested in it for competitive Modern. Oh, here's the Cycle of Talismans. Oh, hello. Here's... Okay, it's the enemy colors, Talismans, 2 mana, mana rock, and that any deck can play because it taps to add colorless, or you can tap to add red or white or whatever in the case, and you'll take 1 damage. Wow, these Talismans, this just supercharged the entire Limited format. They are uncommons, but yeah, this makes a whole lot of accessible mana fixing and mana acceleration to everybody at uncommon. This is pretty exciting. I like it. And you don't have to deal damage to yourself if you're just adding colorless. And like, oof, these are pretty good. I like these a lot. Won't be, I don't think they're good enough for constructed play. There's already been artifacts like these that don't see play right now in Modern Constructed, but yeah, these are going to be great in Limited. Some of them better than others, like the green ones maybe will be more exciting than the red ones, because usually you want to be more lower to the ground aggressive, and you don't want to take a turn off on turn 2 to add this artifact, when instead you'd rather add like a 2-drop creature. But yeah, Talisman's great. Universal Automaton, it's a 1-mana, 1/1 changeling. There you go. Here's the lands. So there's a cycle of enter the battlefield tapped cycle lands, which could have dramatic impact on Dredge in Modern Constructed. Barren Moor, Forgotten Cave, Lonely Sandbar, Secluded Steppe, and Tranquil Thicket. Then we have Cave of Temptation, tapped add colorless. 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color. That's sort of like a filter land. And 4 tap, sacrifice it, put 2 counters on target creature, activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. Cave of Temptation will probably be a pretty high pick in Limited. Here's the other land cycle that's here, is these sort of Horizon Canopy style lands. These are expected to cost a lot of money. The red ones are probably more interesting. And the red and green ones are probably better than the other colors, but still they're all going to be pretty good in Modern. Might shake up mana bases across the entire spectrum. These are probably the most impactful card in the entire set for Modern Constructed. These lands. Here's the red cycle land. Here's Frostwalk Bastion. It's a snow land. Tap stat colorless. For 1 and a snow, until end of turn, this thing becomes a 2/3 construct artifact creature until end of turn. Still land. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a creature, aka it blocks or is blocked by a creature, you tap that creature and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. That's a weird little card. Probably playable in Limited so long as you can get enough other snow mana. Hall of Heliod's Generosity. It's a legendary land that taps that colorless, or for 1 and a white, and tapping this, so 3 total mana, put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. There's already Mistvale Plains. Ah. Oh. I have, okay. I misremembered how Mistful Plains works. A, Mistful Plains enters battlefield tap. B, it only puts a card onto the bottom of your library, so that's not so useful. Okay. So now I see why Hall of Heliod's Generosity was printed. And Heliod is harkening back to Theros block, which was an Enchantment Matters set in some circumstances. Okay, I don't think this can go into the... The mana of the Bogles deck is very strict, so I actually don't think they would even be able to play Hall of Heliod's Generosity, and they'd much rather like draw enchantment cards than put them on top of their library. But there might be something that this enables. What that is not coming to me at the top of mind, but there you go. Hall of Heliod's Generosity. Lonely Sandbar, talked about that. Nurturing Peatland, same cycle. Prismatic Vista, tap, pay 1 life, sacrifice this, search your basic library for basic land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Okay, so this is like Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse, but a rare sort of like fetch land because it puts the card into the battlefield untapped. Doesn't let you search for a non-basic land, but lets you search for a basic land. And this is sort of a buff to any 2-color deck that cares about putting cards in, lots of cards into its graveyard with Delve or Threshold or something like that. Pretty neat. I might need to get myself 4 of these for my Modern collection, as well as probably all these other bloody lands. Secluded Steppe. Yes, the cycle land, the Horizon Canopy style land. I don't know if people have come up with a good nickname for these ones yet. Cycle land, Horizon Canopy style land, and then a snow-covered basic of each type. And there we have it. We did it. Oh my goodness. We made it through the entire set. I don't think I triggered a whole lot of cards that really break open Modern. I think the thing the thing that changes Modern for me the most right now is the fact that the London Mulligan will be in play at the Mythic Championship in Barcelona. And also this obviously impacts everything, but looks like a pretty sweet limited set. And we have to start brewing Modern decks. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and windmill slam the subscribe button above to see more like it in the future. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me streaming Magic Arena every weekday morning at twitch.tv/BlinkyMTG. Hope to see you there.